This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It's 3 minutes after 10, and thank goodness it's over. No more bulletins from Manchester for the foreseeable future. Well, not on the issue of the Conservative Party conference, at least, although we do have to play at least one more clip before we all pack up our troubles in our old kit bag, and it is arguably the most hat stand one so far, even including all the hat stand ones we've listened to already. I'm just looking at my inbox, which I often do, early doors on the programme. And I'm thinking this possibly is going to turn into one of those hours where I end it in a completely different position from where I started it. Because you are united at the moment in your criticism of what Rishi Sunak said yesterday about tobacco, about smoking. Not quite unanimous, but certainly consensus. Jim in Leeds suggests that because Liz Truss is against it, it must be the correct thing to do. He invokes the rule of inverse Truss. He also correctly describes it as a graduated smoking ban, which is remarkable, really, because as Owen, who's listening in France, points out, how will it work? Does it mean that in years to come, a 30-year-old will be asked for ID when buying cigarettes, only to be told, sorry, you are too young? While, and I'll add this to what Owen has said, a 31-year-old will be free to puff away to their heart's content. And, I mean, in brief, Owen, yes, I think it must do that. So if you were born after 2008, anyone born on or after January the 1st, 2009, it will be illegal to buy cigarettes. It would be illegal for anyone to sell you cigarettes after that point. Which means that, yeah, if you were born on January the 1st, 2009, or on December the 31st, 2008, you'll have to carry ID with you if you want to sustain a lifelong smoking habit and produce it every time you're at the tobacco counter. It's crazy, right? But it's also bold, I think. It's very easy to... what's the word I'm looking for? It's very easy to lazily criticise based on colour of scarf. There was so much to pick apart over what went on in Manchester this week. I suspect you're bored of it, aren't you, already? You don't... I mean, in terms of Rishi Sunak's speech and its impact and the ludicrous notion of someone from a party that's been in power for 13 years suggesting that things have been rotten for ages and I'm the man to change it all, it just doesn't actually make any logical sense, which is why all the right-wing newspaper front pages today are cheering it to the rafters. But it reminded me of you, Les, actually, albeit... It's probably less controversial. Not definitely, but probably. It reminded me of you, Les. It reminded me of a bold policy decision taken almost independently from party politics. Now, that sounds odd this week in the context of ULEZ, but if you remember who introduced it in the first place, and it was Boris Johnson, Sadiq Khan has presided merely over an extension of it, then you understand what I mean. It's not necessarily... I tell you what worries me a bit at the moment, and I guess it was inevitable, but Cameron and Johnson and a couple of others, Zach Goldsmith, for example, they managed to defuse political tribalism in the context of environmental policy. So I never really understood why it had to be left-wing to be an environmentalist. And it doesn't have to be left-wing to be an environmentalist. It has now, under Sunak, become left-wing because there is more money to be made in the short term by continuing to mine fossil fuels and burn them at a rate of knots, and big business and donors and the rest of it will, in the short term, benefit more from, if you like, anti-net zero policies than they otherwise would. But it shouldn't and didn't need to be a left-right issue, the environment. And I think smoking is the same. I think this is one of the reasons why I kind of look forward to our conversation this morning, is because I won't know what you think about the smoking ban the moment you tell me what you think about immigration or private education or, I don't know, you name it. You can usually work out what else will be in that hand of cards. Not always, and none of us can do it with absolute accuracy, but generally speaking, you get a rough idea where someone stands on a variety of issues by finding out what they think about one issue. This one is very different. Not least because people that I admire enormously are united in their outrage at the infringement of their liberties. And not least because I can feel my pendulum swinging as we speak, if you could excuse that rather unfortunate figure of speech. What I mean by that is the right to do things. See, I'm probably... I am still broadly in favour of the decriminalisation of other drugs. And yet I find myself... Oh dear, I told you this was going to be a funny one. I find myself broadly in favour of what Rishi Sunak is doing. How can I be in favour of the decriminalisation of cannabis while being in favour of the criminalisation almost of tobacco, or certainly of selling tobacco? There's a question for the ages, but you're not my therapist. We'll work that one out later. The point really, or the question really is this. What do you think? And why? I remember a Labour politician. So you'll remind me in a minute who it was. I remember a Labour politician saying some years ago that you shouldn't increase taxes on tobacco because for poor people, sometimes a smoke is the only pleasure that they have all day. And he was both right and wrong, wasn't he, at the same time? Because smoking is pleasurable. That is why it is addictive. You get addicted to the dopamine hit as much as the chemicals that start coursing through your bloodstream. And if you lead a bleak existence, then a smoke can actually be a brief moment of artificial sort of happiness, if you like. I mean, we need a better word than happiness, but a brief moment of, well, it's a chemical change in your brain, and it is briefly a nicer place to be, your brain, than it was before. And yet the medical impact of smoking cigarettes, how am I supposed to pronounce it? Every time I do a topic like this, someone starts complaining about how I pronounce the word. Can someone say it in my ear in the way that normal people say it? How do you say it? How do you say this word? Cigarette or cigarette? How do you say it? The first one. Well, cigarette, not cigarette. So I get complaints. As soon as I start this subject, people complain about the way I pronounce the word. I don't even know if it's a Kidderminster thing or just a me thing. Cigarette. So the damage done by smoking tobacco, smoking cigarettes is so immense. You can barely put a figure on it. 64,000 people a year still die as a consequence of smoking. 1 in 4 cancer deaths, the Prime Minister said yesterday. You see the parallels with you, Les, because I'm sure there are people out there possibly working for secretly funded think tanks already claiming that's not true at all. Where do these figures come from? But what have you really got to lose with a smoking ban, with a proper, like really widespread blanket smoking ban? What have you got to lose? By banning it. Brief highs, brief dopamine hits. And what do you gain? Well, immediately 64,000 fewer deaths and a shed load less cancer crossing around the world. The NHS currently spends about 138 million quid helping people to stop smoking. But this, of course, comes at it from a very different angle. It would be illegal to sell them at all to anyone born after January the 1st, 2009, which I suggest, because a lot of you are asking how would it work in practice. Excusez-moi. But I suspect the more it kicks in, the further it reaches, the more tempting it will be for retailers to stop selling it altogether. I mean, this is a very, very big step on a path to the complete cessation of sale of cigarettes in the foreseeable future, certainly within our lifetimes, partly through legislation and partly through logistics. What's the point? There'll be so few people left to do it, and it'll be such a faff. How many people are going to carry around ID because when they're in their 40s? I mean, it's incredible to think of the scale of the change. Louise suggests just call them fags, James. Everybody else does. It's never been a word I'm comfortable with that. Probably because I went to public school. I just don't know why. I've never really done that. And of course, a lot of you already pointing out to me that the difference between tobacco and cannabis is the health impacts. So you're quite right, especially if you take it in some of the modern new ways. It's going to be a lot less deleterious to health in general than tobacco is. So there it is. The bit I don't get, and the bit that you're probably going to want to point out to me, is the bit about my freedom to do things that are bad for me. Right? My freedom to do things that are bad for me. Now, as a younger man, certainly within the course of time that I've been presenting this programme, I used to argue that. How dare you tell me? Because, I mean, really, the logic of banning tobacco would extend very, very easily to alcohol, wouldn't it? But just because you can't do all the stuff that you would do in an ideal universe health-wise doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything. So just because it's very hard to argue the difference between a ban on tobacco and a ban on alcohol doesn't mean you shouldn't ban one of them if you get the chance. Do you see what I mean? I think you can have a logical inconsistency here for the benefit of public health. No politician is going to bring in a ban on alcohol, I don't imagine, even though we currently have a Prime Minister and a Mayor of London who don't touch it. So my freedom to do things that are bad for me, I mean, what are your vices? So we've got a tax on sugar, but we haven't got a ban on sugar. Sugar, I think, in the years to come will emerge as a truly epic enemy of public health. Sugar is in many ways all of the things that brain chemistry changes are, and yet probably the most insidious of all. A, because it's everywhere, and B, because we find it so hard to think of it as as damaging or as dangerous is the way. I think sugar can't be dangerous. It's literally sweet. What are little girls made of? It's ridiculous. Little boys are made of slugs and all the nasty stuff. Sugar, that's what nice things, that's what sweet things are made of. But it's pretty dangerous. And that's the bit I don't get. So Ian Dunt in the newspaper today is absolutely livid about this. A big fan of Dunt's. And he makes a brilliant case, frankly, for this interference. But it doesn't reach the parts for me. It doesn't actually swing my pendulum back in the opposite direction. Here is a politician. Here is a population where about a quarter of all cancer deaths are caused by something. Here is a politician who has the power and the will to get rid of that something. What on earth would prompt you to object to him doing that? 0345 6060 973. I think, and it was such a bonkers conference that it's hard to sort the wheat from the chaff, but I think this might be proper legacy stuff. I can't see Labour reversing it, although it depends how far down the road the plan has gone by the time if they are to get into power. But I think this is huge. Just look at those numbers. Look at those numbers. 64,000 deaths a year, 1 in 4 cancer deaths. Goodness knows how much it costs in other health conditions that don't kill you this year but are already costing the NHS a fortune. And now, in the blink of an eye, in the stroke of a pen, in the process of a single vote in Parliament, you can actually just remove it from the body politic. What, and I mean this most sincerely, what is not to like? 0345 6060 973. What is not to like? And I want to make a list. That's not a rhetorical question. I say, what's not to like? You're not supposed to go, yeah, you're absolutely right, James. It's a brilliant idea. Well done, Rishi Sunak. You're supposed to remind me what is not to like. And there's a little hint of what some of those answers will involve with the alcohol parallel, or the sugar parallel, or whatever next parallel. But I think I can conceive of tobacco as different. I think it is so obviously avoidable. It's so many people have given it up. It's not like sugar or salt. It may not be good for us according to quantity, but a little bit of it's never good for you. And then already a text suggesting reading 1984, which I read every year, actually, very pompously, might prompt you to wonder about where the stop line is. It really doesn't, mate. The idea of, in America, you're not allowed to cross the road except at designated spots. That doesn't speak to me of a totalitarian dystopia where, a dictator is presiding over our every thought and utterance. You're just not allowed to cross the road in the places where you're most likely to get hit by a car. Here's some poison. You're not allowed to drink it. Here's some poison. You're not allowed to smoke it. But it makes me feel great. Yeah, but it's killing you a little bit every time you take a toke. 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 10 is the time. I'm going to stick my neck out on this and say I think it's going to be a big success, or at least it's going to be very, very popular. Mick in Devon puts it best. He says it is very close to ULEZ, James, in that most people won't understand it and will think it's some sort of punishment. It's not. It's preventing people from becoming addicted to something that is terrible for their health. No one who smokes today will be forced to quit. I am a smoker, but if I wasn't legally allowed to buy them at an early age, I wouldn't be smoking now. It's prevention, not banning. If there was a pill that made you stop instantly, I bet most smokers would take it. I'm in favour. And so are most of the callers, although I'm going to have to try and keep a couple of phone lines free for the explanation of why we should be wary of governments deciding what we can and can't do in the context of health, because you could make a pretty long list of things that are bad for us that you are allowed to do. So should that list be endless, or should you pick things off it and get rid of them, prevent them, and indeed ban them, because it is going to be a ban for people selling them to anybody born after a certain date. Mark is in Brighton. Mark, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. I just think this is a massive move backwards when most countries seem to be going in the opposite direction by making marijuana legal, pushing an industry that's currently underground, causing problems, that's not taxed and not regulated. They're bringing it so we can tax and regulate it.
Yes.
I think banning cigarettes, pushing another industry underground where it's now illegal.
Well, they won't be banned. It's just you won't be able to sell them to people born after January the 1st, 2009. So it would never be underground in the same way as cannabis. You'd just get your Uncle Bob to buy you a packet if you were desperate to have a smoke. So it's not. I brought cannabis into it myself, Mark, but I'm not sure it works as well as we thought it did.
Yeah, but I mean, eventually the idea is that as the age goes forward, less and less people can. And you mentioned yourself earlier that, you're going to have to show ID if you're out and about smoking and things like this.
These are logistical problems, but we manage with alcohol, albeit that it's not a graduated age limit. Some people still get asked for ID in their 30s because they look like they're much younger than they actually are. Do you smoke tobacco?
I used to. I've given up for about 10 years. I'm struggling with a son at the moment, actually, that is with a teenage son. So it's an industry that I can't stand, but I'm just never in favour of pushing these things underground.
That's what I'm wondering. I don't know if it would get pushed underground. It's not like smoking weed. I don't think you'd have that same sort of. Well, you don't get the same high, do you? You don't get the same hit. So the idea of people sitting around smoking tobacco and listening to Lynyrd Skynyrd, I can't quite picture the subculture of illegal tobacco smokers at the moment. Can you?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. But I mean, kids. I guess the thing with kids at the moment is vaping, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
That is causing problems as well.
It's causing many more problems. But the health impacts are still not fully known, but they are unlikely to be anything like the impacts of smoking tobacco. But yeah, I do know what you mean, but I don't. I'm not gonna. My pendulum isn't swinging on this one. It's going to be an hour of examining my own pendulum today, just so you know, to keep you forewarned. It's not swinging on that because at this point, I'm just trying to think back to when it was first introduced. You presumably would have had tobacco parties and stuff like that, but I cannot currently see teenagers sitting around 30 years hence smoking illegal tobacco while listening to I don't know. What was the band before Supertramp? Was it one pill makes you smaller and another? Listening to sort of hippie music while smoking. I can't see it, but I could be wrong. Thank you, Mark. Tim's in Krakow. Tim, what do you reckon?
Yeah, hi, James. Firstly, love the show. I kind of feel like you're my mate, even though you don't know me from Adam.
No, same here now.
That.
So that's a lovely thing to say, and it is mutual, genuinely, because I sit down here every morning, I start talking to you, and here you are. So thank you.
Indeed, I am. Yeah. I guess my point on this is, whilst I agree that there should be legislation in place to completely rule out smoking, as an ex-smoker, I see it as the most evil thing.
Yes.
But I don't think it's going to work if what they're doing is targeting it in the way that they are. I think the villains here are the tobacco producers,
yes.
Those industries that are making an absolute killing out of, well, basically continuing to recruit more people who they are ultimately going to kill.
Cool.
I think the difference between, for example, like a cocaine producer and a tobacco producer is law, not morality. And I think that's what should be targeted.
In a way, they are they're targeting them by saying you cannot sell it to these people. That's law. That's law. So the cocaine parallel probably works, because you say to cocaine producers, you cannot sell it to anybody, and if your salespeople are caught selling it, they'll get into trouble. And now you're saying to tobacco companies, you cannot sell it to this ever-growing cohort of the population, and if you are caught selling it to them, you will get into trouble. So it's Jefferson Airplane, not Supertramp, forgive me. Carry on.
Right.
I got my pendulum today. My pendulum is rigid. I don't think it's going to swing at all.
I'm sorry about that. I missed that. I'm out and about at the minute, and a truck just rolled past me.
I don't think you're going to change my mind. I mean, how else would you do it? Tell me what your plan would be, given that. And I love your use of the word evil. So how would you do it?
I think I would tax the flip out of those who are making money
so
on this
expensive.
Industry.
So okay.
It would do, absolutely.
To
and
the
I think
point
it would
where
make it,
people can't afford to do it, and therefore it would sort of kill itself almost.
Indeed. And this thing about putting the age limit on it, I don't think that's going to work either.
Well, he would argue that it worked in 2007 when they increased the age from 16 to 18. There was about a 30% drop in the affected age group. So I don't fancy being a newsagent, though, on this one, do you? When someone comes in who looks right on the cusp.
Exactly. And I think one thing that I can't get out of my head is, I have a degree in psychology, and 20 years ago, I was given an essay to write. Why do people smoke? And when people are recruited, it's typically teenagers.
Yes.
Not many people smoke once they're fully fledged adults and know better.
You mean take up smoking? They don't take up smoking when they're fully fledged adults.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And it's so much of it's a rebellious thing. Kids are in the position where they have to come down on one side of the fence. Am I going to be a smoker or am I going to be a non-smoker? The kind of rebel side sort of leans towards becoming a smoker.
It does, probably still, actually, although vaping has filled in a lot of that space. You think of James Dean, or our generation, think of James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause, or Olivia Newton-John in the final scenes of Grease.
Indeed, I quoted the Uma Thurman poster for Pulp Fiction in that essay, because that was when it was.
Yes.
So, I just very strongly think that saying you can't do this, it's bad, is counterproductive in this particular situation.
Yeah, we'll see. You could be right. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I have been reminded of by quite a few callers, that it was in January of 2023, all those years ago, that Wes Streeting announced something very similar to this policy, indeed citing New Zealand's gradual ban on tobacco as something they might look at and do. So when people say Labour can't announce policies because the Tories will nick them, Labour's probably not quite as paranoid as it sounds. I'm not paranoid. They really are nicking my policies and announcing them. But that was in January of this year. It's coming up to 10:30. My pendulum is not really swinging, and that's partly because I'm a bit stubborn, probably, but also partly because these arguments, though pertinent, are a little bit too speculative for me. You're not allowed to advertise tobacco in a way that makes it look cool anymore. I don't think that if Pulp Fiction was released today, I'm not sure that you'd be able or permitted to have Uma Thurman smoking in the way that she is on that original poster. I'm not entirely sure. I suppose it'd be a bit odd for period pieces. If you go and see a play now in the West End and it involves smoking, they smoke fake cigarettes. I think that's law. So it's death by 1,000 cuts, and then this is the final and the biggest cut, the cruelest cut, or the kindest cut, depending on which way you look at it, of all. I'm struggling to keep any phone lines free, and we've got broad consensus, but what we haven't got is a strong libertarian argument as to why I should be free to have a glass of wine every night, even though it's bad for me, or a bottle of wine every night, even though it's bad for me. So what's the tobacco equivalent of that case? 0345 6060 973. Just in answer to the point about people taking up smoking later. I have a friend, James, who started smoking in his late 30s, convinced it would help him lose weight. It didn't, so now he's an overweight smoker.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10:34 is the time. Good politics or good policy or both or neither or one but not the other? I'm not sure. Corpsey gives me pause, as ever, with some statistics, and this is going back to 2019 when the numbers have probably moved further. 60% of adults in 2019 had never smoked. Only 14.1% of the population were smokers. So the problem that Rishi Sunak is solving is perhaps not as big as he would want us to believe. And as Corpsey suggests, each percentage point reduction in that overall number would be a disproportionate investment when something like free gym or cooking sessions would actually help more in the context of the national health. He adds mischievously, the best way for Tories to stop kids from smoking would be by being photographed smoking. Well, I'd like to thank Therese Coffey for doing her bit in that department. She's probably done more to curtail cigar sales than anybody since nicotine first doffed his cap at Superman. But you tell me what you think about this policy and indeed this politics. 0345 6060 973. I will also make the point, because I had forgotten, that Labour had already announced their intention of doing this in the event, or at least the possibility of doing this in the event of them coming to power. So it is perhaps not quite the rabbit from the hat that I may have portrayed it as at the top of the show. Alex is in Londonderry. Alex, what would you like to say?
Well,
Londonderry.
James,
Alex is in Derry. Alex is in Derry. What would you like to say, Alex?
James, where to start on this one?
Carry on.
The government banned, X years ago, drug addicts being shunned. Right, they're still getting them. They're still getting them. Cigarettes are, to me, it's a nonsense because, quite frankly, we're becoming dictators.
No. I think you're mixing up two issues. The harder it is to get hold of, the less likely you are to become addicted.
Well, look, I only can go back on my own father. He was 85 years of age. He died the day before he actually died. He wanted a cigarette, and they gave him one. He was fine. It's personal choice, James. I don't want to be dictated. I don't smoke. I never have done.
Yeah.
He did enough for me and himself. But I am of the opinion if I want to have a cigarette, I want to have it. By the way, they're taxed to the hilt apart from anything else.
There will be a hit to the revenue. That's true.
Of course it will.
But that's already.
The ordinary taxpayers will make up the difference.
Well, it's the numbers are going to be shrinking every year anyway. What interests me is not the civil liberties point that you make or the libertarian point that you make. It's actually the cynicism, now that I'm thinking about it, of essentially announcing that your intention to do something that is kind of happening anyway. The natural attrition. Young people, I've got teenagers, they don't smoke.
No.
Their mates vape, but I mean, we've had parties at our house when like one or two people have been smoking tobacco. Once, when I was their age, it would have been almost everybody.
James, if I was lectured at home not to do something,
You'd go out and do it.
Then I would decide to do it just to be spiteful. I said, well, why am I not doing it? I want to do this. Encouragement is possibly part of the way.
Maybe.
Explaining the dangers, which I think they've been trying to do, and leave it to them to decide. Look, I'm with well-known listeners at a charity. We get endless calls, and this is the least of our problems. You'd be stunned at how many people need that cigarette for their nerves and whatnot.
But they're not. No one's being stopped. No one's being. I'm going to make a stand here. No one is being prevented from. No one who currently smokes is going to have to stop smoking under this legislation.
Yeah, but they're going to die before they get a chance to be allowed to do so.
What do you mean they're going to die before they get a chance to be allowed to do so?
Well, what's on this age group? You have to be X. I can remember you went through all the different ages.
If you were born on January the 1st, 2009, or any date subsequently, so you're currently 14, you will never be able to legally buy cigarettes. Everyone else is golden.
So what age then would one be allowed to buy a packet of cigarettes?
They never will be.
Right, well, that's not a dictatorship then, is it?
Well, no, because no one who is currently smoking, that's like saying it's a dictatorship because you're not allowed to buy cocaine. You've turned your own point on its head.
Look, I'm sorry, but I do feel that it is a wee bit over the top.
No, I'll take that, but we're talking about a feeling rather than a point of principle, or perhaps, I don't know, is there a point of principle here? My freedom to do things that are bad for me. What if they'd never been invented? What if tobacco had never been discovered? What if some person in the mists of time hadn't thrown a bale of dried leaves onto a fire because he thought that they might sort of warm him up a bit, and then, much to his own surprise, he inhaled some of the resulting smoke and thought, whoa, hello, that's all right. Or more likely, they were burning the leaves every night, and then they ran out of leaves and were burning something else instead, and they all sat around and go, oh, I feel a bit itchy. Oh, dear, I feel a bit antsy. Well, why do we feel a bit weird? Oh, I don't like this. Oh, that smoke tastes a bit different. Go and get some of those leaves from over there, Ugg, and chuck them on this fire over here. And so I don't know how it got discovered, but if it had never been discovered, It wouldn't be, I mean, it would be a good thing for humanity, not a bad thing. If Walter Raleigh had never brought it back to Britain, that would be a good thing for Britain, not a bad thing. But I take some of your points. Zaki is in Lambeth. Thank you, Alex. Zaki, what would you like to say?
Hi, I'm a first-time caller. I've been listening to your show for ages, so thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
I guess I'm probably a bit younger than most of the people who've spoken so far. So I turned 18.
Excusez-moi, actually. I examine the demographics for my audience very closely, Zaki, and I am currently particularly popular among 18 to 30-year-olds. So I don't know what age group you are, but a little bit less of the lip, please, young man.
Sorry, sir.
Carry on.
I turned 18 just very recently. And one thing that I found is that among kind of my friends and people like that, many of them they have tried to smoke, they've gotten into it, but then very quickly realized, it's too expensive to kind of maintain as a habit.
That's true.
And actually, to be honest, it's not really like it's not as cool as it once was. And
Clearly.
like most people, and I think, to be honest, like the way in which kind of smoking kind of is treated is kind of like a thing you try once, you get used to it, you get over it, and you move on.
What happens if you're at a party and someone lights a cigarette? What's the sort of response? What's the? I mean,
most of the time what ends up happening is like they'll go out into the garden, do that by themselves or in their small group of people, then they'll come back in, get bored because it's gotten too cold, and come back inside. No one that I know really does it habitually, because I reckon that the majority of people, to be honest, are like, well, their entire lives, all they've ever seen is posters and pictures of, tarred up lungs.
Rancid lungs, and clogged up arteries and things. So for your generation, oddly, I mean, the more we talk about it, actually, it's not that I'm changing my position or I mean, it's still a good idea, but it's not a very big deal, is it, for your generation?
No, not particularly. But I think what I would say, though, is that for the NHS, for example, I think it probably, in the long run, I think, assuming that it survives the next couple decades and actually gets some funding, I think probably this will be pretty good for it, because, I mean, like, diseases caused by lung cancer are some of the most preventable. You just don't. If people don't smoke, then they won't get sick.
Yes.
And so the idea of kind of preserving people's freedom to do something that's going to kill them in the end, at the expense of the NHS, seems like a really stupid thing to do, in my opinion.
I think you put it very, very well. Out of your sort of just 10 random friends, how many vape habitually?
Probably. I mean, like maybe out of my 10 friends, probably maybe like 4 or 5, maybe. And like you said, I mean, I don't personally do it either, to be honest, but I can, and I don't drink either. I'm Muslim actually, so I don't do any of that. But to be honest, like I think vaping is kind of, funnily enough, because it's such a substitute for smoking, and it's basically just a tool for most people to get off smoking. It's kind of seen as a bit kind of lame and tacky.
Oh, okay.
At least among my friendship group.
That's an interesting. I mean, you can't generalise about every 18-year-old in the country, but the lads who were vaping outside Morrison's last night clearly didn't think that it was lame and tacky. They clearly thought that they were rebels without a cause for the 21st century. But it's completely endemic. I mean, that's the point. If Rishi Sunak wanted to make a really meaningful change, he'd probably be going after vaping. Although, as Zaki has just explained rather well, the health impacts of tobacco are enormous compared to almost anything else. 10:43 is the time. So, we've all gone a bit meh, actually, the more you think about it. Yeah, all right, that's all right. It's a nice idea. You might have nicked it off the Labour Party. But the people that it's aimed at are barely going to be touched by it because they weren't going to start smoking anyway. They're too busy vaping or not touching this stuff. So the biggest policy pronouncement at the entire Conservative Party conference was A, something that the Labour Party had already proposed, and B, something that isn't actually going to have a particularly big impact upon the population. So what we all come at it from our own generational standpoint, don't we? So you're thinking, depending on what age you are, I'm 51, very hard to believe. I know it's because I don't smoke. I've got skin like a baby's bottom. You're thinking about how everyone smoked in your era. All the 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16, everybody smoked at my school. And they smoked Marlboro Reds. Absolutely poisonous stuff. Everybody smoked them. And that's what I'm thinking of, subconsciously, when he makes this announcement. It's a good one. Yeah, it's a good announcement. Old Sam will never be able to smoke those disgusting Marlboro Reds anymore. It's great. But he wouldn't. The 14-year-old equivalent of my puffing and spluttering school friend doesn't really exist. And also, think about the smell. You know, the habitual stink of your clothes. That's gone. It's all gone. So in many ways, he's making an announcement that becomes more impressive according to how little you understand of the impact that it's actually going to have, which you could argue is very good politics, but largely pointless policy.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10:48 is the time. Just a little bit of a glance in the rearview mirror for the mad events in Manchester this week. We should have done the front pages, but you know what I've done, don't you? I've cut all my papers up to chop out the stories that we're going to talk about on the programme, so I haven't got them. So you heard, I can say this with some confidence because I was here. You heard all of Rishi Sunak's speech yesterday, and it was rubbish, really, wasn't it? But no, it definitely wasn't rubbish. Huge decisions to change Britain, says the Daily Telegraph. Daily Mail inevitably goes even further down the madness that day. Rishi gave Tories a reason to believe he can save us from Keir's wokery. What does that even mean? Don't ask them, they don't know either. Daily Express is in a class of its own these days. I don't imagine you ever see it or read it, but holy McMoly. Game changer Rishi's radical policy. Game changer, ! Rishi's radical policy, blitz to fix Britain. That's one of the worst headlines I've ever seen on the front page of a newspaper. They think it's all over. No, that's got nothing to do with... So the Sun, interestingly enough, have not joined in. You've got a very small picture, top right-hand corner. Rishi, I'll axe SIGs and A-levels. The Sun, keep an eye on the Sun. It's always interesting. Being adjacent to power is even more important, remember, than being able to influence it in the first instance, because you can't begin to try to influence it unless you're adjacent to it. The Daily Mirror quite rightly call it a train wreck, and there's your selection of front pages. So it was a very odd gathering, but it's very important to recognise as an enemy of footballification. And on this programme, of course, not only did we invent the concept of footballification, but we are sworn enemies of footballification. The idea that you base your opinion of anything upon your tribal political loyalties. So if, for example, your party ended up being led by a disaster, you would never be able to admit it. You'd have to pretend that the person in charge of your party was amazing. And we've seen lots of evidence of that on both sides of the House of Commons in recent years. But luckily, some of us are capable of loosening our scarves and restoring the full flow of blood to our brain. So we managed to approach issues with a bit of clarity. I think we all suffer from it a tiny bit. It's probably based on empathy more than anything else, or just how self-interested your view of the world is, as opposed to how national interest inspired your view of the world is. So it's very important to acknowledge, while a lot of very weird people queued up in Manchester to make some very weird speeches and some deeply dishonest claims and some completely bonkers pronouncements, a bloke called Danny Kruger started talking about a new world government that wants to take over, and he's an actual MP. But it's very important to remember the sensible Tories who remain in the fold and are indeed even vying for office, vying for the leadership. Should a battle commence after the next general election. And Penny Mordaunt is, of course, widely regarded as being in the sensible category, largely because she did a brilliant job carrying a medieval weapon at the coronation of King Charles. And who here can say with a straight face that does not prove her political mettle in the 21st century? Don't at me. It probably wasn't medieval or indeed a weapon, but she carried it, and she carried it with aplomb. Not a plum, aplomb. Carrying it with aplomb would be weird, even by the context of coronation paraphernalia. The speech she gave to the party conference yesterday, I think, cements her reputation as a very sensible Tory and not in any way as bonkers as the rest of them.
Stand up and fight for the freedoms we have won. Against socialism, whether it is made of velvet or iron. Have courage and conviction, because when you do, you move our countrymen, our communities and capital of all kinds to our cause. Stand up and fight, because when you stand up and fight, the person beside you stands up and fights. And when our party stands up and fights, the nation stands up and fights. And when our nation stands up and fights, other nations stand up and fight. And they stand up and fight for the things upon which the entire progress of humanity depends. Freedom. That is what conservatives do. That is what this nation does. Have courage. Bring hope. Stand up and fight. Stand up and fight. Thank you, conference.
We should have kept the applause in. Was the applause enthusiastic, or was it because I'd have clapped like this? What just happened? Oh my God! What just happened then? Do you know what happened, Keith? What happened? What the heck was that? Who am I supposed to be fighting? I mean, there's a technical inaccuracy in what she said. If the person next to you stands up and fights, we don't stand up and fight. We normally say, "Sit down, Keith. It's not worth it. Seriously, leave it. It's not. You'll get us all chucked out. Just sit down, will you, and stop fighting." What was that? I'm going to listen to it again. I may leave the microphone on this time.
Stand up and fight.
Okay.
For the freedoms we have won.
Ooh.
Against socialism, whether it is made of velvet or iron.
Where'd you get velvet socialism from?
Have courage.
Okay.
And conviction, because when you do, you move our countrymen, our communities and capital of all kinds to our cause.
What?
Stand up and fight.
Okay.
Because when you stand up and fight, the person beside you stands up and fights.
Who are we fighting?
And when our party stands up and fights,
who are we fighting?
The nation stands up and fights.
So we're all fighting.
And when our nation stands up and
on the same side.
Other nations stand up and fight. And they stand up and fight for the things upon which the entire
who are we fighting against?
Progress of humanity depends.
What? The entire progress of humanity? Freedom. Okay.
That is what conservatives do.
What?
That is what this nation does.
Pardon?
Have courage.
I do.
Bring hope.
I have.
Stand up.
Bring help.
And fight. Stand up and fight. Thank you, conference.
You're welcome, Tony Mordaunt. Bring a dressing gown and a fishing rod, I think was the next line of that particular speech. Bring a dressing gown and a fishing rod and a six-pack of tenancy. But that, I'm tempted to play it again, but we've got a phone in. That's one of the craziest things I have ever heard. But anyway, I think we can all agree she's the sensible one. Pete's in Nottingham. Pete, have you lost the will to live?
No, I'm just going to take up smoking after listening to that song.
Go on, what did you ring in to say? Fantastic.
So this is a generational view, as you've talked about before. Probably just a personal view, but I'd throw it in. So I started smoking when I was 11 in the 60s, and clearly it wasn't legal to smoke then, and we got into all sorts of trouble, and we got caught. Even got caught by the local policeman at one time. But, we did everything to get a smoke. We used to pinch them off our parents. We bought Rizzlers and picked dog ends up off the floor. I smoked tea leaves before. We'd do anything to get a smoke. So, the legality wasn't an issue.
Not once you were addicted.
I don't know whether it was an addicted or it was a father. Anyway, but
well, you didn't smoke tea leaves for fun. You smoked tea leaves because you desperately needed a smoke, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't work, let me tell you. Anyone out there, do not try that.
No, nor do the insides of banana skins. Because when I was at university, people started claiming you could smoke the inside of banana skins and get high. That doesn't work either. Carry on. Sorry.
Point being, I'm now 68 and I've been practicing smoking for about 40 years. And the things that changed me were, I think cost was a big thing when I was getting married. We wanted to save money. And then when the health issues started to become more prevalent and were over time. My mum died of lung cancer, and things like that came more into the way you felt after you had a skinful on a Saturday and you'd been smoking all night. It was clear that didn't feel right. And then ultimately, when we had a child, it was, whoa, we don't want to be smoking around a baby.
It's kind of we've had prohibition through pricing and education, really. So is this fine? Is this step necessary, do you think?
I don't think so. I think the concentration on those. But the big thing was, when we had our daughter, it was, look, that was the catalyst to say we must start smoking. We don't be smoking around her, damaging her little lungs, and then also perhaps giving her the habits that we picked up from our parents.
That's very true.
So,
I think you're right. I think the more we approach it from a personal level, the more pointless perhaps the policy becomes. Although that doesn't mean it's a bad thing to do. It just means it's probably not, a laurel upon which Rishi Sunak can rest with particular satisfaction. I'd rather have it in place than not, probably, on reflection, but it's not going to make a huge amount of difference, largely for the reasons that Corpsey pinned down half an hour ago, which is that even in 2019, the proportion of the population that smoked was about 14%. I remember we grew up, Pete's a bit older than me, people still alive grew up in an era where you'd have advertisements featuring doctors telling you that smoking was good for you. So if you imagine the journey that we've gone on as a population, this is perhaps a relatively small step in the direction of a smoke-free country, as opposed to, as we've all done, imagining that this had been introduced when we were 14, when Pete was smoking tea leaves and I was trying to wash Marlboro Red aromas off my school clothes. If it had been introduced then, it would have been huge. But introducing it now, while not unnecessary or undesirable, it's definitely not huge. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. Something that is huge is the state of the rental market in this country. Another interesting journey. We never used to talk about renting on the programme. We always used to talk about owning. And you'd use property ownership as a measure of broader economic health or decline. I barely give a thought to home buyers now. The renters are having such a nightmare. I've barely got the bandwidth.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
You know that we do this a lot together, as in hang out in the morning and spend quite a lot of time poking fun at various public figures, particularly politicians in recent years. And goodness me, there's been an awful lot of fun to poke, has there not? I think we've just reached a new reality, almost. I think we've just reached a new gear. I kind of missed it the first time around because I was focusing on the more traditionally bonkers stuff, like Mark Harper claiming that, what was he claiming? That we're all going to be forced to eat turnips or something, or we're all going to be forced to ride unicycles to Sainsbury's and back, or that the councils are going to stop us from whatever it was. And then who else did we have? We had that dreadful Susan Hall telling a fringe meeting at conference that Jewish people were frightened of Sadiq Khan, and people queued up on this programme earlier this week to tell me that they really don't. They really aren't. But the actual madness of Penny Mordaunt's speech is off the charts. I've never seen a response like it. Harge points out she's failed on the first two rules of Fight Club in the first two sentences of her speech. I could sit here. What do you think happened there? That's not what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about renting. But what are we fighting? Quite a few of you Beastie Boys fans, which is gratifying to know. You've got to fight for your right to party. Or Braveheart. Did it come from Braveheart? I mean, it did sound like she was quoting something. And then when you listen to it again, and we'll listen to it at least once more, my apologies if you don't share my sense of humour, but I don't know that this was prepared. I think a bit of it was prepared, and then she just sort of went a bit mad. Listen to it again and see if you can spot the point. So she's got this thing about fighting, right? And then she can't have come up with the velvet iron socialism stuff off the cuff, which means that it was written down on paper somewhere and she both read it and decided, yeah, I'll go with that. What? Velvet? And then I don't know whether there was a reaction in the room. Might have to ask Natasha, did she get a little unexpected round of applause? Or maybe something happened elsewhere in the room and there was a collective intake of breath and she thought, oh, they like this. I'll give them some more. If you've ever seen a comedian on top form, they will ride a wave of approval and laughter from an audience to the point where you're clutching your sides. And a lot of that won't be in the script. It'll be the stuff that really gets you is the stuff that's off the cuff. You know, the ones you watch Jimmy Carr, for example. Susie Dent was talking to me about this for a forthcoming episode of Full Disclosure. The speed with which he can get an off-the-cuff gag, or a Ricky Gervais, and then to go higher and higher. Dara O'Brien is a master of this as well. Higher and higher and higher. So you get a reaction from the audience, and you somehow, it's a form of performance alchemy, and you know it works. So you'll extend the pause, you'll enhance the words, you'll increase the speed. What happened in that room after she said some fairly mad stuff to make her think, I know what they want. They want some really mad stuff now. It's absurd. Just listen to it again and see if you can spot the moments where she is probably going to places that she hadn't prepared in advance. And then I promise I'll try not to play it to you again. But please remember throughout, this is the sensible candidate in the current sort of leader of the House. Is that a cabinet position? I can never remember, but it doesn't matter. She's about number 2 or 3 on the bookies list of most likely next leader. I have no idea what she's talking about. Can we keep the applause at the end this time and see what it sounds like? Just to get an idea of whether or not that room in Manchester was a sort of twilight zone, unrecognisable to the rest of us.
Stand up and fight for the freedoms we have won. Against socialism, whether it is made of velvet or iron. Have courage and conviction, because when you do, you move our countrymen, our communities and capital of all kinds to our cause. Stand up and fight, because when you stand up and fight, the person beside you stands up and fights. And when our party stands up and fights, the nation stands up and fights. And when our nation stands up and fights, other nations stand up and fight. And they stand up and fight for the things upon which the entire progress of humanity depends. Freedom. That is what conservatives do. That is what this nation does. Have courage. Bring hope. Stand up and fight. Stand up and fight. Thank you, conference.
It's hard to tell. It doesn't sound like a huge audience, but there are some headbangers in there shouting. Speaking of headbangers, it could come from a Status Quo song, I'm told. Shots ring out in the dead of night. The sergeant calls, stand up and fight. You're in the army. Now. No? Just me? I don't know what to say. So, I've got to do a topic. I'd be quite happy. We've got an amazing guest coming in at 11:45 with an amazing story. I'd be quite happy just to meander around that little clip for the next half an hour. But I don't know if it would be very professional of me, particularly when people renting their homes face such an astonishing situation about which I know nothing. So what were we thinking about the other day that had gone up exponentially? It had gone up like, shoplifting. So you normally expect social change to be incremental, right? You normally expect the dial to be turned up quite slowly. It's why I use the analogy of boiling a frog so much. In fact, it's the very first line of my new book. The idea that you just dial it up slowly so that by the time the water is boiling, you've not noticed. And that's normally true of almost anything, the good stuff and the bad stuff. Look at the smoking ban. You know, that there were some fairly big twists of the dial there, but it's been incremental. We've gone from being a country where doctors would appear on billboards encouraging you to smoke cigarettes to a country where, and I always remember this, it wasn't long after I started at LBC, because one of the billboards that I'm about to refer to was on my journey to work. And they put up the billboards showing arteries clogged with fat or cholesterol or whatever it is medically that increases with smoking. And the Advertising Standards Authority got a bunch of complaints from people who were literally saying, I hate that advert, it's putting me off smoking. I loved that. I just thought that was a beautiful little vignette of life. And now we're a country where you're not even allowed to advertise cigarettes at all anywhere. You can't even stick them on the side of Formula One cars, although Tony Blair, of course, delayed that decision after interventions from Bernie Ecclestone. So, that's what I mean about change being quite gradual. And then sometimes you wake up one morning and you think, hang on a minute, that's not gradual at all. So in 2019, right, if you were a landlord or a property agent and you had a new property to rent out, in 2019, you would get 6 telephone or email requests to view a new place. That is only 4 years ago, right? 2019. That's not an opinion, that's counting. So you'd get about 6 telephone or email requests to see a new place. By spring of this year, that figure had risen to 20. So you put a flat on the market at 10 o'clock in the morning, and by 11 o'clock, you've had half a dozen inquiries. That's 4 years ago. In spring of 2023, you put it on at 10 o'clock in the morning. By close of play, you've had 20 inquiries. Probably not even close of play, probably within an hour. And now, today, 5 months on from the spring, it's 25. You put a flat on the market, you get 25 people trying to arrange a viewing. The average rent for a new let outside of London, this is not confined to the capital. I just said capital, which reminds me of that speech. What was she talking about when she talked about the capital? I didn't quite understand that. Anyway, outside of London, the average rent is now £1,278 a month, which of course is after tax. That's from your taxed income. So that is 12,000, say 250. That's another 3,000. So that's about 15 grand a year after tax. And I know you're unlikely to be paying it yourself, as in you probably share. But goodness me. And Rightmove say that the prices have risen by another 10% in the period from July to September compared with the same period last year. In London, average advertised rents hit £2,627 a month. That's up 12.1% on last year. And I mean, even down in Bournemouth, where they've spoken to a lettings manager, the gap between high demand and a severe shortage of rental stock at the moment is just crazy. Now, the population has not increased that much, if at all, since last year. The idea that we have sort of sleepwalked into this scenario is one to which I'm slightly sympathetic. I don't understand what's happened. So, as is often the case during the time we spend together every day, I've got to, and I don't have long on this, so don't hang around. Don't sit there waiting for someone else to open proceedings and then you join in. You need to hit the numbers now. I really want to see those fingers. You need to hit the numbers now, and you will get through. But there's 2 questions. The first is, what happened? How exactly has this happened? I'll give you a clue. The answer is not immigration. So save yourself tuppence with ringing in to say that. This breakdown between supply and demand is not going to be explained by either people arriving in Dover in small boats or an immigration policy that has ended up doing the exact opposite of what it said on the tin. I want a slightly more intelligent answer than that. Remember, once you allow immigration as an answer to a question about the state of the country, you've got Nigel Farage popping up on television blaming traffic jams on foreigners. So what has happened? 0345 6060 973. And this, in some ways, I think I'm more interested in, partly because of the age of my own children and the imminent arrival of this phenomenon in our lives. What's it like? I suppose the question is, basically, it's not a word I like to use. The question is, fundamentally, that's better. So I arrived in London in 1991. Actually, I had a hall of residence. 1992, when I looked out to get my first place in London as a student, 3 people sharing. We were all right financially, and we were, if not spoilt for choice, we had absolutely no problem at all finding a nice little place in Battersea where we had a room each and a nice little garden and Battersea. After Battersea, I moved to I moved to Chelsea, but that had quite a lot to do with the person I was going out with than it did with my own personal financial situation. But the lovely flat in Chelsea to Earl's Court to a little bit in Soho. You could afford to live in Soho. So again, to reference my Susie Dent podcast that is released either this week or next. Susie Dent, when she was working as a lowly etymologist in Oxford would commute from London and live in Soho, in the heart of Soho. You could live in the heart of Soho 30 years ago, in your early 20s. And now, I mean, you wouldn't get arrested. So I want to know exactly how hard it is. How hard it is. On the other hand, as Caroline points out, who cares about the housing crisis when there's velvet socialist wokery to fight? You make an excellent point, Caroline, and if you stand up to fight, I will stand up to fight. And if I stand up to fight, Keith will stand up to fight. And if Keith stands up to fight, Anton Deck will stand up to fight. And when Anton Deck stand up to fight, Gordon the Gopher will stand up to fight. And when Gordon the Gopher stands up to fight, other nations will stand up to fight. And when other nations stand up to fight, we will all stand up to fight. And eventually someone will put their hand up and say, Penny, if we're all fighting, who are we fighting against? And she will say, wokery and cheese imports. And we will all thank the Lord for such leadership. I got distracted. Caroline, be quiet, please. Of course we care about the housing crisis, albeit that we're very conscious of the permanent threat of velvet socialist wokery. So what has happened, and what's it like out there? I mean, I can't even conceive of it. And I rented until I was 28. I rented in Manchester and I've rented in London. And the idea of not being able to find somewhere, or the idea of turning up to check out a property and there being 24 other people there already, I don't get it. I don't get what it must be like. How hard is it? What do you do? Do you move home? Does it limit the jobs you can do? Do you stay in do we still have YMCAs? I don't even know. How long can you sofa surf for? And you're not skinned. You've got the money. But you can't find... I mean, it is absolutely bonkers. It's 11:17.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 11 is the time. The average queue of tenants requesting to view a rental property in Britain has lengthened from 20 to 25 in 5 months. In the immortal words of Marvin Gaye. What's going on? Charlie's in Putney. Charlie, what would you like to say? I like Putney.
Hello, James.
Lovely
how are
part
you?
Of the world. Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
Good. Yeah, I just got a pretty good example of this, really. We were renting a flat for we were there for 2 years. It was a 2-year lease. By the time we were coming round to sign the lease again, I negotiated to say, I won't go into it, but we had a lot of problems with the flat, and I said, I don't know what's going to happen with the rent. We were paying $16.50 a month.
Yeah.
It was a 2-bed. I said, all the problems we've had, I don't think we should have to spend any more money. So most of the problems I fixed myself, and they agreed to a 1-year lease. So originally it was 2 years. So they said, yeah, we'll that's fine, but we'll do a 1-year rolling lease. Mm. So I said to my wife at the time, we're out in a year, I guarantee. And lo and behold, I was right. At the end of that year, we received Section 21.
Oh, so you're on your bike. Why? Why did you know that was going to happen? Just what was?
Just because the standard was 2 years. And the condition of them not upping the rent was that it would be changed to a 1 year.
We'll only give you a year. So they were clearly planning on slinging you out. How does this illustrate the bigger picture, Charlie?
Well, I'm getting on to that. So I think
that was my polite way of saying hurry up.
at the end of that year, when we started looking, obviously, at other properties, first of all, the situation was you would call to view somewhere and say, look, can we do, let's say it's a Monday, you'd say, can we do Wednesday? And you'd get told, no, it'll be gone by then. And there were people that were taking flats without viewings, without even seeing them because they're so desperate to get in. But the average price we could find that was within our budget was what we're paying now, which is $2,250. So within a year, we've gone from 1,600 to 2,250.
And yet, property prices are coming down. So something really weird is happening.
Well, yeah, but I see it as, I don't know if this is right, I'm not an economist, but I see it as a scale, and you've got a balance between house prices and mortgages, right? So house prices come down, mortgage rates go through the roof, which is what's happened in recent times. House prices will come back up and mortgage rates will come back down. But so by the time the mortgage is a rate that you can afford, suddenly the prices have gone up and you need to save another 10, 20 grand to afford the deposit. The only way to balance that is to add a third scale, which is supply, and that's not happening.
I still don't understand. How can prices be coming down for buying while they're rocketing for renting? Do it again in a sentence.
I see what you're saying, yeah, and I couldn't answer that.
No.
I don't know.
Me neither.
I don't know. I mean, the demand for...
It's too hard to buy a house.
Well, yeah, but that's why I guess the demand is there because of that. So people.
But who's
can't
in the
buy
houses? We've got lots of people rattling around in houses that are too big for them, but they can't sell them because the prices are coming down. I don't. Well, there's the question. It could almost be mystery hour. Are you anywhere near the half moon?
The what?
The half moon in Putney.
I don't know it. We actually. So when we moved, we're more Southfields now. So,
okay. Big fan of the half moon. So we get some amazing gigs there. Really.
Whereabouts in Putney is that?
Right, just back off the river on the main street.
Oh, the river. That's too posh for me, James.
That's where I won't tell you who lives there because it would be indiscreet of me. But they are a jewel in the crown of the LBC firmament. Thank you, Charlie. There it is. I mean, I think that's unsustainable. But of course, what is normal to you is utterly abnormal to me. So I'm not going to embarrass Charlie by asking him more details about his actual financial situation. But when I was renting as a young man in London, and I wasn't on a particularly great scratch. I mean, certainly not in the early days when I was working in a shop, but I had a social life. I'd go out a lot. I'd go to concerts. I'd eat out. Presumably, when you're paying 40-50% of your after-tax income just on property, you're just living a very, very different life from that which previous generations would have taken for granted. 0345 6060 973 is the number. Tom's in Lichfield. Tom, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thank you. So I'm stuck in the rent cycle. I'm in my sort of mid to late 20s. And me and my partner, we basically had to move into a very small sort of almost 3-room, if that, maisonette.
Yeah.
And, I'm on a particularly, a comfortable-ish wage.
Yes.
And it just feels unachievable now to get a house. And it's worrying, really. I don't really see a way out.
Do you understand what's happened? I mean, particularly the question of why, because I've got a mortgage, but I'm a homeowner, so I watch that more closely than I watch rental prices, because you're always interested in whether your house is likely to be going up or down, and they're generally coming down at the moment, while rents are rocketing, and someone's going to be able to explain that. I sense that it's not going to be you or me, Tom.
No, I'm afraid not. Oh, I wish I could, but no, it's scary. It is really scary.
And it can only get worse because someone in your position, and I'm glad that you're in Lichfield, because I don't want this to be a London-based conversation by any stretch of the imagination. Actually, we've got someone waiting on the line who's in Bavaria, so that spreads the conversation quite a lot. But you become, with every increase in your rent, you become measurably less likely to become a property owner because the money that you would be putting aside for a deposit is going to your landlord.
Absolutely. It just feels like the goalposts just keep getting smaller and smaller. It seems the closer I get, and then they change it again, and yeah.
And there we are. So when to be fair, I don't want to patronise you, but you're still very young. I wouldn't give up on it. I wouldn't give up on it yet. I think I was roughly your age when I got on the property ladder, but on the income I had then, I wouldn't be able to now. And at risk of giving you some form of mental collapse, Tom, we got a 110% mortgage in the year 2000. So they come in and give you 10% of what the property's worth to furnish it. And I mean, that must strike people listening today like children being sent up chimneys in Victorian times. It's so utterly alien to the world that they inhabit. Ollie's in Camden. Ollie, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yeah, I work for a property developer in London, and I realise there are loads and loads of reasons why rental prices have been high.
Well, give me a few. Don't just dismiss it. I mean, I haven't got many written down yet, because the big mystery to me is how the property. If I sell people selling houses are getting less than they would have got a couple of years ago, and yet people renting homes are paying exponentially more than they would have done.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big gap between people who can afford to buy homes and people who are renting. So with the way that interest rates have gone, landlords in their droves are selling up, which is great for first-time buyers who can, see more supply on the property market for cheaper. But those houses used to be rented to renters who can't hope to buy those houses now, and they've just been taken out of the rental market.
Okay. So here's something I've noticed, which may or may not be relevant. I've noticed a lot more empty houses around the place. Because but they might be an asset or people who've. But no, but then you'd be able to rent it out really easily. So that can't be it.
Yeah, that
doesn't make sense.
Me.
Do you know what? Actually, Ollie, between you and me, I said I've noticed a lot of empty houses around the place. I've noticed 2 on my bus route that have been empty they've been empty for ages, and I'm extrapolating from 2 empty houses on quite a short bus journey some form of national significance that is clearly not in place at all. So let's pretend that part of this conversation never happened.
Sure, yeah, perhaps that's anecdotal. Yeah, one reason I wanted to talk to you about was the planning system in this country. It is so hard to build new homes for rent. We're currently trying to build 7 flats in, a London borough that I'd rather not name. We have planning permission to do it. Currently, the land there is sitting there doing nothing. It's concreted over, sort of in a back street. And we have planning permission to do it. What you then have to do is discharge planning conditions.
Well, that's the other story out there today, isn't it? That is agents, developers calling for a relaxation of regulation to allow them to build more houses, more properties. But I hadn't seen it's no harder to build properties for rent, is it, than it is to build properties for sale?
No, I wouldn't say it is. I think it's hard to build them all at the moment. I mean, the planning system needs to be relaxed, yes, but resourced as well. I mean, we just can't get a reply from the council. Currently, we all want homes to be built. We want to build these homes, but we literally can't do it because the council won't respond and allow us to just.
That's very interesting. You're right. Actually, that is also anecdotal. Actually, Champ. While we're swinging that accusation around, but it's probably a more pertinent anecdote to the bigger picture than my bus journey to the station every morning is. And actually, you remind me that I now understand why you didn't want to name the borough. One of the UK's largest Conservative-run councils has warned that it faces financial meltdown and has called on ministers to fix the broken local government funding system. So whoever is supposed to be answering your phone or responding to your emails quite possibly doesn't exist or is disappearing under a mountain of paperwork. And I said it before and I'll say it again. The crisis of funding councils needs to be removed from party political tribalism. Whether it's Birmingham or whether it is, in this case, Hampshire County Council, one Labour, one Tory, don't, whatever you do, let the usual suspects in the media portray it as socialism of either the velvet or the iron variety that is to blame.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
11:34 is the time. So I'd give you little tastes of my inbox sometimes. It's generally, I'd say it's a 90% glorious place these days. Didn't used to be. We used to have armies of trolls bombarding the programme on a regular basis. I hope they're all right. But here's an example of something I look at and think, have we been listening to the same programme? What garbage you constantly speak, pathetic, privileged idiot. Which bit of that show would that? All of it? None of it? Bits of it? This bit, that bit, I don't know. That's all I'm literally saying for the last 30 minutes is, good grief, how can it be that renting is so expensive? And then, of course, with the added question now of the fact that property owners, or house prices rather, are the worst they've been. The market is in its weakest state since 2009, according to the lender Nationwide. They slipped 0.8% in August. They're down year on year, even more than that. A typical home is worth £14,600 less than it was 12 months ago. That's working on an average property costing just shy of £260,000. So, I mean, it's just bizarre. Prices are down 5.3% from August of last year. Hang on, let me check when this was written. You've got to be careful. Oh, it was written yesterday. Blimey, that's up to date. So down something percent, 5.3%, and yet rents are going through the flipping roof. I don't quite understand that. I wonder if anybody does. Derek is in Christchurch. Derek, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Nice to talk to you again, my friend.
I know that voice. Oh, yeah. Sweet Caroline.
That's whoa.
Derek, for people who don't know, was a Neil Diamond tribute act working in Benidorm who had to come back because of Brexit.
That's it.
Look at that. Mind like a steel trap, Derek. What prompts you to ring in on this one?
Well, it's been a complete disaster from one end to the other. I started working down this way, and I was offered work up in Yorkshire, where I came from originally, as you probably know.
Of course.
And I went up there with the promise that I was going to be doing tribute. So I decided to take my caravan up there on the campsite. I went and took my caravan up there, kept the flat on because it's a little rented flat. Well, flat. It's a bedsit
in Christchurch.
In Christchurch,
near Bournemouth.
So I wanted to go up there because I know for a fact that I could have got somewhere like a 2-bedroomed house with a bit of a garden to let the dog out in, blah, 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 for the same price.
Got you.
Went up there and started doing the work and started to get the deposit together to put down on somewhere. And then the mortgages, I think it was the mortgage, the interest rates or something like that went up. And all of a sudden, the places I was looking at for £600 a month were nearly £1,200 a month, and they're really stamping on you with regards to the dog and everything.
Of course.
So to be honest with you, I struggled like heck trying to find somewhere, and a few other disasters happened. I had a problem with my car, which I had to pay out, but that's beside the point.
Well, it isn't. I mean, because the higher the rents get, the harder it is to keep your head above water in general, isn't it?
This is it, and price of fuel it's gone through the roof. And of course, pulling a caravan, I've got to drive something like a Discovery, haven't I?
Of course.
So it's not like cheap to run.
No, of course. Yeah, different costs. Your costs go up in other areas when they come down in one.
Yeah. So I was travelling like 90 miles a night to some of the gigs, and then 90 miles back.
Right.
So I was ending up with nothing. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I bit the bullet and decided to come back down here again. And now I'm struggling because it's just basically people book well ahead.
Yes.
And of course, I'm talking to friends out in Spain that have stayed out there. They have residencias, of course, and they're doing all right.
Oh,
so
dear.
I've got to try and get some work together, but it's just been an absolute disaster with regards to renting.
Because the relationship between income and outgoings has been completely broken, hasn't it? So
it's just wrecked it, absolutely wrecked it completely.
I guess actually, the property prices are coming down because mortgage payments are going up. Therefore, people can't pay what they would pay previously. So actually, it's not quite as counterintuitive as it originally looked because rents are going up because there's fewer people buying houses. But I still don't have... I've got this idea of there being towns full of empty houses somewhere. It's the only way I can understand what's actually going on. I thought there'd be work on the south coast.
Well, that's what I've come back down here to do. I came about 3 weeks ago.
All right.
I've done my website and stuff like that. But
well, let's give it a plug then, Derek. Let's try and get you a little bit of business.
Are you sure?
Of course I am. Yes.
You don't ask me to sing again, are you?
Yeah, well, you're more than welcome to. I mean, you might drum up a bit more trade if people could actually let the dog see the rabbit, Derek.
Okay, make my website is www. awesomeneildiamondtribute.com. Simple as that.
Go on and give us a few bars.
Love on the rocks ain't no surprise. Pour me a drink and I'll tell you some lies. Got nowhere to live, but I'm living down here in Christchurch.
Does topical as well. awesomeneildiamondtribute.com. You look after yourself, Derek. We'll speak again soon. And I'm sorry you're on your uppers, but you'll bounce back. I'm certain of it. 11:40 is the time. Abdul is in Kingston. Abdul, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Great show as always.
Who do you do a tribute to? Who's your artist that you do tributes to?
I don't, unfortunately.
Come on, everyone's got something inside. A little bit of Elvis. Come on, Abdul.
No, not me, unfortunately. Just touching on your kind of base, what you're trying to establish, how rents have gone through the roof. We're a small agency in Islington, and what we're finding is that there's not enough stock. Whether you're a large agency or a small agency, there's just nothing around. And a lot of people are trying to renew.
Yes.
And what landlords are doing are, obviously their payments have gone up, so they're having to double the increase what they would have done previously.
Yes.
And where tenants have had it, where they've been in a property for like 3-4 years. I think one of our previous callers was in a property for 2 years, had a 2-year contract and then only renewed for a year. What we're finding is that where landlords have been more than accommodating in the past, their payments have just gone up and they're having to recoup some of that money. And I'm finding that's why the prices have gone up so much. and it's not ideal. I completely agree. But we're finding that a lot of tenants as well, they're not helping themselves. Where they can afford to pay more, they're outbidding people.
Yes.
And
so you end up paying what you can afford rather than what the property is worth. But it's not even good news for the landlords, really, by the way that you describe it.
Not.
And then the question of why the numbers are going down on property ownership, some of the answers are actually the same.
Yeah, exactly. And what I'm finding is a lot of our landlords who we've kind of looked after for a number of years, they're having to sell purely because they can't actually afford it. I'm having conversations with them saying, look, you know what, if it's due to fees or whatever, we'll try and help out. They're like, we're just
out of it. We're out of it, Abdul. Yeah. I'm out. It's like the Dragon's Den. Yeah. I'm out, they say.
Exactly.
And what does the future look like? What does the light at the end of the tunnel look like? I suppose it's interest rates coming down and things having a levelling. Also, we always do this, Abdul, not you, me. We get to 42 minutes into a conversation about renting without mentioning Airbnb. So my confusion about where are all these properties that people would previously have been living in.
Yes,
a large part of that answer is in large parts of the country, particularly cities and obviously seaside resorts and the rest of it, they're going to be rented out on a week-to-week basis rather than a year-to-year basis.
Yeah, and that's purely due to the government's kind of rules on taxing. I mean, landlords are the only people in the UK have to pay tax on money they haven't actually earned.
Yeah, as opposed to shareholders, and I can live with that, to be honest, in the great scheme of things, but not perhaps in the minutiae of this single issue. We think we found. Thank you, Abdul. Lots of jokers out there pointing out that perhaps Opposites Attract would have been a song that you could have got stuck into early doors. We think we found the inspiration for Penny Mordaunt's speech. I don't know how much of it you've heard. I've played it about 400 times on the programme today because it is among the maddest things I've ever heard in my life. Not just among the maddest political speeches I've ever heard in my life. It's among the maddest things I've ever heard in my life. But we think that we have found the inspiration for it. See if you can spot any echoes here.
Strike and 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 strike until you have victory. For every enemy that is aligned against you, let there be that we would strike the ground, for you will give us victory, God. I hear a sound of abundance of rain. I hear a sound of victory. I hear a sound of shouting and singing. I hear a sound of victory. I hear a sound of an abundance of rain. I hear a sound of victory. The Lord says it is done, for I hear victory, 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 victory in the corridors of heaven. In the corridors of heaven, victory, 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 victory.
That was Donald Trump's spiritual advisor. This is the leader of the House of Commons.
Stand up and fight for the freedoms we have won. Against socialism, whether it is made of velvet or iron. Have courage and conviction, because when you do, you move our countrymen, our communities and capital of all kinds to our cause. Stand up and fight, because when you stand up and fight, the person beside you stands up and fights. And when our party stands up and fights, the nation stands up and fights. And when our nation stands up and fights, other nations stand up and fight, and they stand up and fight for the things upon which the entire progress of humanity depends. Freedom. That is what conservatives do. That is what this nation does. Have courage. Bring hope. Stand up and fight. Stand up and fight. Thank you, conference.
Oh, boy. Was it Oscar Wilde who said that America and England were two countries divided by a common language? Probably.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
11:49 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Guest in the studio is the investigative journalist Anthony Barnett. As someone in the trade, I'm intrigued by the fact that someone who was on dispatches at Channel 4 for years, 15 years, I think, and a former investigations editor of The Observer, has worked with the activists at Led by Donkeys on his latest scoop, because that says something about the state of the industry, but that is of less interest than the actual scoop itself to normal people. And that's where we'll start. Anthony, you've become something of a master of the, we call it an undercover sting. Most recently, I think, with Matt Hancock and Kwasi Kwarteng getting their dollars and pounds mixed up while revealing various willingnesses to intervene on behalf of your mythical clients. What's the latest one? Because it's altogether more serious.
It is in many ways, and I have to say, Led by Donkeys are one of those rare groups of people that are willing to kind of commission brave, bold investigations and asked me. We looked at the government's plan to deport some refugees to Rwanda, and we were thinking about how on earth can we look at some of the issues involved in this plan that gives us discomfort. So, we decided to do an undercover operation and approach people that we knew that had worked for the Rwandan regime and see what they really thought, beyond the spin, what they really thought of the country, its human rights record and the refugee plan. So, we approached a British PR firm that had been working closely with the Rwandan regime up until recently, and he introduced us kindly to the ambassador in London.
Who did they think you were?
Oh, yeah, sorry. We pretended to be a fake Southeast Asian business who was interested in investing in Rwanda, and that's how we approached the British PR company. And he then kindly introduced us to the Rwandan ambassador in London, who used to be very close to the president in Rwanda, who was the former justice minister.
So we'll start then with the public affairs agent, a chap called Terence Fane Saunders, who, well, you introduce this if you want. You tell us exactly what's happening here.
Yeah, so this is our undercover reporter who's involved in a Zoom conversation that we recorded, explaining that he wants to interested in investing in Rwanda and asking him what he really thinks of the regime and the country.
I mean, we haven't organised a trip for any hostile critics out to Rwanda because we thought that might be playing into their hands. They would just be digging for negative stuff. So the people who've gone out have tended to be either enthusiasts or people who are open-minded. We coined a phrase, Rwanda works. And it does. It's totally different to other parts of Africa from that point of view. So I'm a big fan of Rwanda in many ways. Yes, it's not quite a dictatorship, but it's run with a very strong central government. I mean, Kagame is, so again, a bit like the early days, I suppose, of Singapore. And the Kagame was very tough. And similarly, Kagame, if he thinks, he encourages opposition. There are opposition members of parliament and so on. But if he thinks that somebody's trying to undermine it, yes, he is, and his people are rough. They are criticised by Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International and so on. There are things happen in Rwanda which bluntly are not good sometimes. Things happen, people have disappeared. People who are critics can be locked up. He will take criticism, but if he feels this criticism is going to damage or undermine or is malicious, whatever, they do get locked up and they get released after a while. But and Amnesty International will criticise him.
I don't think I've heard it's not quite a dictatorship offered up as a positive before.
Yeah, it's not quite a dictatorship. I mean, this is really the reason why it's important, of course, is whether Rwanda is a safe place for refugees, asylum seekers to be deported. And I think the country, when you look into it, has obviously it's transformed since the terrible genocidal wars in '94. But there are grave concerns amongst not only just Amnesty or Human Rights Watch, but the US State Department has been a powerful, very strong critic of what they see as significant human rights abuses. So that's why it's important to bring that to light.
Right. Well, and of course it's light that's vanishingly rare in the current British media landscape, because you would normally expect an American government intervention on an issue such as this to get a lot more attention than it's getting from most of the British media, which continues to cheerlead for this bizarre Rwandan plan.
Yeah, indeed. Well, certain elements of the media.
Of course, certain elements of the media. So this connection made, this contact made, the oils, the wheels start getting oiled, the wheels start turning, and your undercover operative then ends up in the Travellers Club in St James in August of this year, just a few weeks ago, talking to the ambassador, who is a former Justice Minister and was in post, I think, when Paul Rusesabagina was trying to rescue 1,200 people from the well-documented story of Hotel Rwanda.
Yes, I mean, it was obviously that happened some time ago, but he's Paul Rusesabagina is viewed as, he's the hero portrayed in the film of Hotel Rwanda, and he saved 1,200 lives, and he became a human rights activist and a critic of the Kagame government, but he was under threat, so he fled Rwanda, became a Belgian citizen and moved to the US, and obviously was a big irritant to the Kagame regime, and they arranged for him a flight to stop over in the Rwandan capital, where he was arrested and put on trial for terrorism.
So the Justice Minister then, now the High Commissioner, not the Ambassador here, Johnston Busingye. Let's have a listen, shall we, to the encounter between him and your undercover journalist, particularly on the issue of refugees who were shot in 2018, just 5 years ago, after objecting to cuts in their food rations.
Over the course of the lunch, Mr Busingye made a number of comments that will alarm critics of the UK government's Rwanda plan. The ambassador was dismissive of an incident where Rwandan police shot and killed a number of refugees. Although several people died, Mr Busingye didn't appear too concerned.
Ministers have come to Rwanda, they have taken BBC and everybody, they have seen what is going on ground, but when they get here, they say, wow, there is an incident in 2012 where the police shot 10 refugees. Yes, it might have happened, but so what? Here in the UK, someone is shot every day, and it is on BBC and it is everywhere, but I haven't said the UK shoots people. That's not what I'm saying. No. We did our prosecutions of the people, we did the investigation, what happened, and so on and so forth. It could have been a mistake. So that is what the media will want to turn Rwanda into.
He later clarified that he got the year of the shootings wrong, 2018, not 2012, and Human Rights Watch has established that the number of dead is at least 12. So you would think, with this research in place, with this sort of on-the-record commentary, you take it to the Home Office or to the government and say you can't do this sort of business with this sort of regime, and they say you're absolutely right, we'll call it all off now. I presume that's not what's happened.
No, that's not what happened. They've been very, very silent since we've aired the results of our investigation. I mean, one of the things that we, when we initially watched this back, were struck by was just how dismissive he was. We understand that there were actually potentially a lot more than 12 that were killed. Don't forget, he was Justice Minister at the time when this investigation allegedly took place. Again, Amnesty tells us that the investigation found nobody responsible for the killings, but actually they ended up arresting some of the refugees who took part in their protest over food rations. And again, the reason why that's important is, if you can imagine, if you were refugees that, for whatever reason, made your way to the UK, for desperation, for war, or, for economic reasons, you end up being deported to Rwanda. And then after a while, things don't go, your food goes down, things aren't going, and you decide to organise a protest. The last time that happened, a number of them were shot dead by their own police. So if you're arguing that Rwanda is a safe place, is now a safe place, this is evidence when it certainly wasn't a safe place for refugees. So that's why we thought it was important to put on the film.
And I forget which Home Secretary it was, the current one or the one before, where they were unaware of this, or apparently
unaware.
It's the current one.
It was the current one. I think Suella Braverman was asked about this, I think, on a BBC, I think it might have been Laura Kunsbo. Anyway, it's a BBC thing, and she hadn't even heard of this incident at all, which I think is also...
They shot refugees dead 5 years ago, I didn't know that, but I'm still confident that it's a wonderful place to send refugees. That's not even an exaggeration of what we're looking at here.
No, I think what she actually said was that was 5 years ago. This is 2023.
That's not an opinion, that's counting. Yeah. A UK government spokesman has said that we remain fully committed to this policy, as does the Rwandan government. We will continue to defend the policy robustly in the courts. It's in the annals of all the stories that you've done. Where do you rank this one?
I think it's certainly up there, as you said. The politicians talking about how much they want to earn is one thing, but this is a cornerstone of the government's policy, and it affects real people's lives in a way that some people think is a very cruel and unethical way. I'm not judging that, but certainly if the more we can illuminate what's going on or what has gone on in Rwanda, then people can make their own judgments on whether or not the plan is a good one or not.
There's another element of it that we haven't touched on here, but is equally fascinating, is that he ends up, the High Commissioner, essentially criticising our entire immigration and asylum policy. So it's a full-length film. Very briefly, Anthony, is that the future then for journalists like you? You will organisations like Led by Donkeys are going to become as much a part of your portfolio as programmes like Dispatches or indeed papers like The Observer?
I think even more so. I think they've got a strong appetite. This film reached 5 million people, which is significantly more than programmes on terrestrial. They've got the hunger, the ambition, they're crowd-funded, and they are willing to take risk, which in the current media environment, a lot of the mainstream, a lot of the broadcasters, newspapers are nervous of doing. And these guys are fantastic. You come up with an idea, you work with them, and they are willing to give it the green light, which has not been my experience in previous employers.
And it's a 24-minute film, I think, that you've posted online. Yeah. So it's a proper programme, is it? Yeah, stick a few adverts in there, and you've got a
Dispatches have got a half an hour.
Yeah, exactly that. And I will hopefully add a few numbers to that 5 million now by retweeting it directly from my account, or you can go to @ByDonkeys, where it is the pinned tweet. And actually, while we're on the subject, I'd add Byline Times to the list of organisations that are doing work that perhaps more established media organisations in this country at the moment should be doing as well. Anthony Barnett, thank you.
Thanks, James.
It is 12:01. It's Thursday. Talk about a gear change. It's Mystery Hour next.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Talk about from the serious to the silly. That was an astonishing piece of work done by Anthony and his colleagues there over at Led by Donkeys, which I have now tweeted from my Twitter account. So either go to @ByDonkeys or @Mr. James OB to watch the full thing. And also, you didn't see Anthony, did you? But he looks exactly like you'd want an investigative journalist to look like. Like, he's far too serious-minded for me to say that when he's actually in the studio. But if you were casting an investigative journalist, you'd cast someone who looks a lot like him. Anyway, just go and check it out. Because now it's time for Mystery Hour, which is your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not available anywhere else on your radio dial. Not only that, but it's your weekly opportunity to win a Mystery Hour board game. Christmas is coming, and it is an absolute joy to play. It really is. Nothing to do with me, so I can say that without any fear of boastfulness. It's not like when I'm plugging the book. The board game is brilliant. And you can get it at mysteryhour.co.uk or by being my favourite contributor of the week. There it is. There's the competition. And it's a proper grown-up competition, so I am now duty-bound and indeed legally obliged to say full terms and conditions can be found at lbc.co.uk. So mysteryhour.co.uk for the game, lbc.co.uk for the T's and C's. 6 minutes after 12 is the time. People ring in with questions, and then other people ring in with the answers. We don't take texts. You've got to ring in, really. And when you provide an answer, I ask what your qualifications are. They don't have to be academic or even very serious. You might know what you know because you saw it on TV last night. But the point is you need to know that you know it. You're not allowed to look anything up. In some ways, the celebration is as much about the myriad sources, the multifarious sources of knowledge, as it is about knowledge itself. And in some ways, when I sort of was going through a pompous phase a few years ago, I know what you're thinking, when does it end? I was going through a pompous phase a few years ago. I used to reflect upon how this is an antidote to a world in which you can find out a lot of stuff with your fingertips. You can find out a lot of stuff with a device that is currently nestling in your pocket or your purse. So it's a sort of celebration of knowledge, old-fashioned knowledge that is learned rather than merely Googled or searched. But as I say, that was during a pompous phase. So we'll forget all about that. 7 minutes after 12 is the time. Shall we crack on? I think we shall. Dominic is in Bispham in Lancashire. Dominic, question or answer?
It's a question, James. I can't believe I'm actually calling.
Well, you definitely are.
Yeah,
you definitely are. Either that or we're both dreaming.
Yeah, Andy, Liam and Tom are going to be jealous. Anyway, it's about sleep paralysis. Like, sometimes when I wake up, I can't talk, I can't move. Like, my whole body's just still, and it scares me.
How long does it last for?
Well, it feels like forever, but I can only assume a couple of minutes or even a couple of seconds. But I can't move. I try screaming, and my mouth it'll open, but no sound will come out or anything. It's scary.
Have you spoken to anyone else about it?
I've asked a couple of my mates, and they say they get it, but they're really never worried. But I just thought it's a question for mystery, and I really want to know.
No,
why.
I mean, it's a thing, I think. It's a thing, but I mean, it sounds absolutely terrifying, because normally you're in a dream when that happens. You're asleep, and then you give yourself a shake, and you wake. But you give yourself a shake, and you're already awake, but you still can't shake, as it were.
Yeah, I'm fully awake. I'm the TV, the dogs, the missus beside me, and I try screaming to her to say what's up with me, and nope, she can't hear anything.
Blimey. How often does it happen?
It's happened twice this year already.
Okay, but we'll try and find out. Should be. So, I mean, I guess the reassuring thing is that it is definitely a thing, but you want to know what the thing it is. Thank you, Dominic. Take care. 8 minutes after 12 is the time. It's a nice start, actually. Sleep paralysis. What's happening to Dominic and anyone else who suffers from it? Luke's in Portsmouth. Luke, question or answer?
I have a question, James.
Carry on.
So, why do no London-based football clubs have London in their name? But other cities do, and other capitals in other countries do, like Sporting Lisbon, Paris Saint-Germain, Real Madrid, but none of the London clubs do.
I mean, isn't it just because there's so many?
Well, Madrid has, I think 4 teams in their top league.
Yeah.
So maybe not as many as London, but still enough to maybe.
It's going to be about the evolution of the clubs and the fact that they play against each other. So clubs grew up. I mean, I won't go definitive on this one, but just thinking about it, it's going to be because you can't claim to be London. They're probably in the earliest iterations, they all played against each other. So Arsenal, Brentford, Chelsea, going, ABC, is there a D? Crystal Palace is another C. Fulham is D. F, D, E, F. So they'd all have played. So you can't, it'll be something to do with that, won't it?
I mean, you may well be right, but I just wondered, was there almost possibly a pact between the clubs that none of us
will agree to? It was
London.
Woolwich Arsenal. So no, that's not got any. Tottenham, Brentford, Wimbledon, Brentford, Bromley, Barnet. Chelsea.
You may well be right. But
no, I don't. I'm just thinking out loud. I love it. It's a great question. It's never really occurred to me before. But if the answer doesn't involve the fact that the clubs grew up so quickly that no one could claim to be London, then I'd definitely be surprised. But it's a great question. And also, it reminds me that Kidderminster Harriers finally picked up 3 points on the road on Tuesday night, Luke, which is probably as exciting to you as it is to me.
Huge Tuesday.
Huge Tuesday, unless, of course, you're a Dorking fan, in which case my commiserations, but you did do us in the Cup last year. 10 minutes after 12 is the time. Holly is in Bury St Edmunds. Holly, question or answer?
It's a question, please, James.
Carry on.
So I work for the 111 service, and I was wondering, when was 999 first used on the phone as a way of getting through to the emergency services?
That's a great question, but you see what you've done, ironically enough, given that that's the number you'd call if you wanted the police. And I like the fact you've rung in with the question, but that's going to be very easy for people to cheat on, isn't it?
Well, I suppose so, but I'm hoping someone may just have an interest in...
Well, that's what I now have to... Now you have put me in the role of having to be Columbo when they ring in and I say, what are your qualifications? And we have to establish whether we believe them when they say, well, I just happen to be a historian of emergency service.
I was thinking, because with, obviously the times of Jack the Ripper, so 1888,
yes.
Back then you would have just gone to the local police station or found the local policeman on the street. And then when obviously phones were introduced, I don't think they would have had that service
Well, you'd speak to an operator first, wouldn't you, back in the day? You'd say the operator would say, hello, caller, how can I help? Or something like that. And you'd say, oh, hello, I'd like to talk to the police, please. And then say, putting you through, caller. And then, hello, this is the police. Or something like that, perhaps.
Yeah.
So when did automated switchboards kick in? And
for the emergency services.
Either then or shortly after, the 999 number kicks in as well. Why do you want to know? It's a good question, a lovely question.
Well, because I just wondered it. I mean, as I said, I work for the 111 service, so I just was thinking one day, I wondered when the emergency services...
So 111 is the NHS one, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
What's the one for non-mega serious crime? 101.
101, yeah.
10. Is there? I mean, do you socialise together? Do you ever all go out together?
No.
Is there a bit of snobbery involved? A little bit? Is there a bit of tribal? We don't like those 999. We're not going to be knocking around with the 101ers are all right, but I don't like those 999ers.
No,
none of that. Okay, I'll try and find out for you, Holly. And thank you for the work that you do. It's a crucial service. Liam is in Oxford. Liam, question or answer?
I've got a question, James.
Go on then.
Is there Cockney rhyming slang in any of the world languages or equivalent?
Rhyming slang?
Yeah.
It won't be Cockney?
Yeah.
That's a lovely question.
Thank you.
Oh, it really is, isn't it? So apples and I'm just trying desperately to think of something, but that would mean that the foreign language, which I don't really know very well, would have to yield very quickly a word that also rhymes with another word from the same language that I don't know very well.
But there's got to be loads.
Yeah, but what? I can't do it, mate. I'm sorry, but I mean, it seems feasible, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd say feasible, but unlikely.
Okay.
We'll see how you get on. Is there any rhyming slang in other languages? That actually is one of my favourite questions in a long time. Not that there's anything wrong with the other ones, but just in terms of something that if the answer is as fascinating as it might be, then that question becomes an absolute humdinger. Thank you, Liam. Wendy is in Petswood. Wendy, question or answer?
It's a question.
Yes.
First of all, I'm so glad to talk to you because you got me through lockdown and my mum's passing last year, so thank you for that.
Oh, Wendy, thank you for that. That means so much to me, and I'm very, very proud that I could have played a small part in those processes for you. Thank you.
You did. Well, a great night. On to the question.
Yes.
When I was a little girl, I'm in my 60s. When I was a little girl, we used to do a thing at school. We used to play this game where we would stand in a door frame, in a doorway.
Yeah.
We would stand upright and we would press our arm with our hands at the side. Yeah. We would press our arms against the frame,
pushing outwards to the frame. Yeah,
as hard as you could, and you'd hold that if you could for about a minute, really, really hard.
Yeah.
Then you would turn sideways after you'd finished, and your arms would float. I'm doing it now.
Yeah.
Your arms would float up in the air as if you had no control. It was like as if you were doing an angel sign. And I want to know, what does it? Is it muscular? Is it neurological? Is it autosuggestion? What causes that to happen? I tried it as an adult and it happens as long as you relax while you're doing it.
I was going to say, when did you last try it? When did you last do it?
No, I did try it a few weeks ago when I last rang to try and get this question in, and I checked.
You thought, I better just check. I better just see. But you didn't get on.
Yeah, no, that's right.
I love it. It definitely works. I don't think it's even just the door frame, is it? You can sort of do it in there's various other variations on it as well. Let's find out for you. I love that, Wendy. Thank you. I'll try and get you an answer. And thank you again for your kind words. It do mean a lot to me. It's 16, and I'm obviously very sorry for your loss. 16 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We need to know what is happening with sleep paralysis, why no football clubs in London have London in their name, when 999 was introduced for emergency calls. Do any other languages... This is a very good crop of opening questions, isn't it? The rhyming slang. Is there any rhyming slang in any other languages? I can't think of anything. I haven't got the language. I wish I could think of something. It's up the apple, up the poms et poivres, but poivres doesn't rhyme with escalier, which is anyway. It doesn't matter. And that thing when you push your arms out against a solid object and then you step away from the solid object and your arms fly up in the air. What's going on there? Exactly, anatomically, biologically, physically. 12:16 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
Sleep paralysis, London football, 999, rhyming slang, and arms, rising arms. It is 19 after 12. Sam's in Oxford. Sam, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Sam.
On a standard like bath towel, at each end there's always a sort of stripe of coarser material compared to the rest of the towel.
Less towely
yeah,
material.
Less towely, coarser. What is that for?
Is it on all of them? I don't think it's on all of them.
No, it's not on all of them, but it is on like a high number of them compared to, say, like a smaller towel.
Is it not just decoration?
I feel like it would serve a more practical
Really?
purpose.
You think you're supposed to use that bit for specific...
Well, yeah, we don't want to get too delicate.
No, we certainly don't. I'd be surprised, frankly, but you never know, do you? The internet's full of things that you have been doing all your life without realising you could have been doing it differently.
This is true.
You're on. So I know what you mean. I don't like coarser. That's confusing. It's shinier, really.
Shinier, and it's less fluffy than the rest
less
of the towel.
fluffy, yeah. There's like a band of shininess.
Yeah.
A shiny
on
band.
either end.
At either end. I think it's so when you fold it and you put it on the bath rail or the radiator, it just looks nicer. But I shall leave it out there for an expert. If indeed anybody knows the answer to this question, Sam, you may have stumbled upon one of the great unresolved mysteries of the universe.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so. It's 20 minutes after 12. Dean's in Shoreham. Dean, question or answer?
I have an answer, James.
Carry on, Dean.
I'm also trying to redeem myself because I was on this show a few months ago and I asked a question about why there wasn't mouse-flavoured cat food and you slaughtered me. So I'm going to try and redeem
But that wasn't
myself.
your fault, you see. That is, there are people deciding what questions are worthy of being put through, so you don't hold full responsibility for that.
Fair enough. But this is really a weird coincidence because I was reading an article about this very subject yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
So it's fresh in my mind. The answer is because when these clubs were formed, they were named after the district or the area of London that they were from.
Yes.
So like you said, Crystal Palace, Fulham, or named after the workplace. So West Ham was originally called Thames Iron Works. Arsenal, well, as you said, Woolwich Arsenal, because they were based in Woolwich and they were staff at a munitions factory originally. So basically, pretty much like you said, nobody wanted to call themselves London because of the.
No one would know where they were because partly because London's so enormous.
Yeah, the closest it ever came was when Chelsea was formed. One of the names proposed for them was London Blues.
Okay.
And they rejected that for the reason, as I said, they didn't have the audacity to claim the whole city for themselves. I mean, they were based.
They probably
in
would
Fulham.
do these days. They would do these days.
Yeah, they were based in Fulham,
Still
and
are.
obviously there was a team already called Fulham.
Yeah.
So they had to name themselves after the next district, borough, whatever it's called, along from London, which was Chelsea.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't. I mean, there are other teams in Madrid, and I know like Getafe are in Barcelona, but they're not named Barcelona. So you do get other teams in those capital cities that aren't named.
So
after.
in a sense, and I don't know what the story is with, for example, Atletico and Real, but in a sense, no club ever claimed to be London. No club ever claimed to be the London club representing the whole of London. United and City in Manchester both think they are Manchester, don't they?
Yeah. So Tottenham just were representing that area of North London. Yeah.
I like it. I think there might be a City of London football club, but again, that would actually enforce the point, wouldn't it? Because because it's such a specific. I'm not even sure that's true. I think there is. But that is speaking about a very specific geographical enclave, so it would actually fit the theory.
Yeah, the actual city. Yeah,
we are the city of London, not London. I like that. Qualifications, read it yesterday.
Yes.
Round of applause for Dean and a reprieve or whatever it was, a rehabilitation after your mouse-flavoured cat food question. Thank you, Dean. It is 23 minutes after 12. Nick's in Richmond. Nick, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
So the 999 service was invented to, if you remember the old ring, you had to dial your numbers into the ringer.
Yes.
And you had to turn the dial. I don't remember these things. My parents had one.
All right, don't rub it.
Yeah, quite. And you should, if you get to the end of the circle, you should always hit 9. So if you do that 3 times, you go through to 999. And on your on the old touchpad phone, if you follow your finger from the 5 down, which I believe has a dot on it, you'd always hit 9. So you press that 3 times, and that's why it's 999, because you can't. In theory,
yes,
you should be
you'd be able to
every
find it in
single
the
time.
dark or with your eyes shut or in a smoke-filled room or if you can't see for medical reasons rather than circumstantial ones. But that wasn't really the question then.
So it was invented in the 30s when I believe it's when the dial-ups, the ringing actually started. So I can't remember what they're called, so I don't have one myself. But the ringing, the circle. So when you in the 30s.
So with the rotary, when the rotary phone was invented, we think that the 999 came in.
Yes, because you needed a single number.
But 30s is, it's a bit broad, isn't it?
Late 30s, maybe.
Late 30s, well, mid 30 could be, couldn't it? What are your qualifications? Paramedic. And so what? You've looked into it because of that, or it comes up in training or something like that?
No, dispatching does, which is quite interesting. To go through to BT operator, which is really interesting stuff, because if you don't speak to the operator, it automatically goes through to the police. But if you call for the ambulance, the stuff is incredible what they have to go through.
Of course
and your 111 operator, that is what they do is incredible stuff.
Yeah.
And so is the 999 operator, the calls that they have to take and stuff, and the abuse they have to take over the phone. Where's my ambulance? Where's my police car?
Yeah.
Hats off to these people. They do a great job out there. Such little money, little money as well.
Thinking of others. I'm going to whisper something to you, all right? Because I don't want any more calls on this now. I want to go definitive. I want to give you a round of applause. All right? So no one else is going to know about this. So I'll whisper something to you, and then I'll ask you the question again, all right?
Okay.
So it's June the 30th, 1937.
June the 30th.
Okay. So are we sure we can't pin down the date, Nick? Can we get like a slightly tighter, more specific? Because late 30s, mid 30s, it's probably not good enough. So it's not going to make the next round of the board game, is it?
June the 30th, 1937.
Beautifully done, mate. Look at that. Superb.
I'm putting that on my CV.
What a mystery hour moment that was. Imagine being able to just pluck that date from the ether in such a fascinating fashion. 26 minutes after 12 is the time. Paul's in Highgate. Paul, question or answer?
It's an answer, please, James.
Carry on, Paul.
And it's gamma-aminobutyric acid and glycine.
So that's sleep paralysis. I don't know if you've got me on. The phone sounds a bit muffled.
Sorry. I'll try and get a bit closer. Is that a little bit better?
Marginally, yes.
Marginally.
Go on.
Right, so it's 2 chemicals in the brain, GABA, which is short for the great big long word I just told you,
yes,
and glycine. These are 2 chemicals excreted by the brain during sleep, and their job is to keep you paralysed during dreams.
Oh.
Otherwise, you would act out in your dreams as though you were actually walking around. So people who don't have enough of these chemicals, they're the ones who sleepwalk or who do crazy things in their dreams because they're acting out their dreams.
Gosh.
Because your body doesn't know where it is. It can only react to whatever the brain is telling it.
Yes.
So if these chemicals weren't there, you would act as though you were in your dream.
What does Dominic have then? A surfeit of these chemicals?
He's got, what it happens, normally when we wake up, the chemicals drain very quickly and we get a burst of adrenaline, which keeps the body to move.
Oh.
But it's very common that some people, for some reason, sometimes these chemicals can be blocked through other drugs or alcohol or other activities.
Right.
But it's usually intermittent.
Yes. Well, he said it had happened to him twice this year.
Yeah. Sometimes it isn't, and it becomes chronic, and then you've got real problems. And it's one of the things that I treat along with other therapists who specialise in this field.
Gosh.
It's surprisingly common. It's really terrifying. It literally only lasts seconds, but it feels like hours because you are paralysed and you can't scream. You can't.
No, well, he said. It clearly
eyes.
freaked Dominic out, and you can fully understand why, because it's like a waking nightmare, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is absolutely a waking nightmare. It's absolutely that. That is the actual description.
So I think you've given us some hints, but I shall ask you the formal question of what your qualifications are in this field.
Okay. Well, I'm a hypnotherapist, and I specialise in sleep disorders and anxiety, which are always closely linked. So
are they?
It's something I deal with a lot.
Why are they closely linked?
Yeah. Because anxiety and sleep disorders, if you're anxious, you're less likely to sleep well. If you're less likely to sleep well, you're going to be anxious.
Yeah,
So
I was thinking specifically of this one. So this one isn't an anxiety-linked one, but a lot of
it
insomnia.
can be.
Can it really?
It can be. It can be, yeah. Because often with anxieties, someone may be on drug therapy, and that may interfere with the chemicals in the brain, and these are some of the chemicals which can be affected by that. So
Lovely.
These things are all closely linked.
So what would you advise if Dominic is increasingly troubled by it? You would advise him to see a hypnotherapist, would you, in the first instance?
Yes, because he can learn to, not be so freaked out by it,
Yes.
just accept it, and he can also learn perhaps a little bit more deeper, more restorative sleep, so that it's unlikely to happen. There's no guarantee, but it can help.
Lovely answer.
Is going to help.
Oh, great stuff. Round of applause for Paul, please.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Lovely stuff. 12:30 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It's not the hem. We're not stupid. It's not the hem of the towel. It's the band above the hem. So there's a couple of inches from the hem. There's like a flat band of shiny towel. That's what the question... I know what a hem is. Cook. Honestly. Sleep paralysis, we've done. 999, we've done. Is there any rhyming slang in other languages? Adie's been in touch. He's had a crack. I'm going to be honest with you. It's not great, but I mean, points for trying. What's he gone for? Manzanas y peras is your escaleras. I don't even have enough Spanish to know whether that's close to correct. But it's not. I don't think you're suggesting that it's an actual thing. You've just done what I failed to do and come up with some rhyming slang in a foreign language that might be plausible. I suspect there's no rhyming slang in other languages. But if there is, I really, really, really want to hear about it. 0345 6060973 is the number you need. The shiny bit, not the hem on a towel, what's that for? Is it just the aesthetics? Is there a purpose? Has it got something to do with the weaving process or the drying process? Who knows? I just need to know. And Wendy needs to know, and so do I. Why our arms? When you sort of put your arms out, push up on a table or something like that, and then you pull away from the table and your arms rise naturally into the air. So you've exerted yourself against an immovable object, and then you move and your arms. So she does it in a door frame. You put your arms pushing out really hard against a door frame, and you keep doing it for about a minute. Then you take a step forward or you turn sideways, and your arms rise apparently miraculously into the air. What's going on there? Dave's in Burton-upon-Trent. Dave, question or answer?
It's a question, James,
Carry
please.
on, Dave, yes,
I spoke to you. I used to live in Derby. But,
we shall adjust our records accordingly, Dave.
How are you, boy? Yeah, it's two words for you. Barcode.
Yes.
Now, is there like some sort of mega computer that produces
I think it's one word, actually.
I've just got one word for you, James. Barcode.
Oh, yes, barcode. Thank you, Dave. Carry on.
Now, do companies, do they buy a batch of barcodes, or is there a mega computer that produces them? Because surely there must be thousands of products every split second, barcoded.
Yes.
So do they ever get duplicated, like crab sticks could be varnish or something like that?
Interesting. Sure, yeah. You wouldn't want to get your crab sticks mixed up with your varnish, would you?
Yeah, they'd be all sticky, wouldn't they?
It would be very unpleasant. I don't know the answer to your specific question.
Yeah.
We've done something on this, but many, many moons ago.
Yeah.
Many moons ago. And it is surprisingly centralised. But it can't be. You can't. There's no way.
Split seconds, though. They literally thousands.
Also, if you brought something back from America and ran it through a British till, it's not going to come up with the same. So what might not be on the. So how do they work, really?
That's in a nutshell. How do they work, Jim?
How do they work, these barcodes?
Yeah. Linking barcode.
I like it. I mean, I think it's I think it's one of those things where when we find out the answer, we go, "Blimey, that's incredible."
Yeah, all right.
Thank you, Dave. How are you finding Burton compared to Derby?
Yeah, we moved the business from Derby because were you born in Derby?
Flipping heck, you're good. Did I tell you that last time?
Yeah, you tell us every time Derby's mentioned, you mention it. That's
well, all right. You're making me sound boring now, Dave.
Now, we moved the business from Derby to Burton-on-Trent. We sell fires and wood-burning stoves and gas fires and such like.
Lovely stuff.
It's going all right. Yeah,
it's going all right. Is it? Good to hear. What's the name of the company?
It's Derby Gas Tech.
What? But you're in Burton now.
Yeah, but it's registered as that.
Oh,
but
I
we
see.
also call gas and stove.
That's more like it, isn't it?
Oh,
Because you
bless
don't want
you.
to confuse people wandering around
no.
bars. Why is that stove shop called Derby Gas Tech?
I not confused myself.
That's right, I bet it's called Gas and Stoves. Thank you, Dave. You take care, and good luck in the new location. 12:37 is the time. Johnny is in Birmingham. Johnny, question or answer?
It's a question, please.
Carry on.
I'm led to believe in this country we have something called policing by consent.
Yes.
Which means, well, I don't exactly know what it means, but
to be honest with you,
in other
nor do I,
countries,
mate, actually,
in other countries, I don't think that they have the same setup, and I wondered what that actually meant, because I've never sort of signed a document that says I consent to being policed, or
well, it clearly doesn't
like
mean that, then, does it?
No.
So what does it? So really, the question is, what does it mean? I don't know that no other country has policing by consent. I don't know that for sure.
No,
but
I don't know. I mean, is it something to do with the fact that like other countries might have armed police, so it's kind of more of a police force rather than a service? I don't know.
We've got armed police. I mean, I know they're not armed like everyone. They're not all armed, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. If the answer doesn't contain the words Robert Peel, I'll give you the money myself. But I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the answer is. So we'll try and find out. Thank you. Yeah, I like that a lot. Thank you, Johnny. What does policing by consent mean? And is it just us? 0345 6060 973. How do barcodes work? The shiny bit on the bath towel, not the hem. Not the hem. So rude, some people. I can't believe you've let this question on. It's called a hem. It's not the hem. Also, I'm not that stupid. And nor is Sam, who rang in with the question. And Wendy's arms and rhyming slang in other languages. Please let there be some rhyming slang in other languages. Please. Paul's on the Wirral. Paul, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
About the question about barcodes. And
God, that was quick.
Them.
That was quick.
Yeah. So barcodes are actually just a different character set, if you will.
Yes.
It's like if you were in on a computer in Word or whatever, and you can choose, do you want a Chinese character set or a Western English or whatever, it's just a different character set. So when you select the letter A, rather than it appearing in the form that we know what a letter A looks like, there's a certain width of black line and the space next to it that depicts that. And it's the same for every letter and the number from the alphabet. It's got a different width bar. So you've got infinite variations then on what you can, pretty much infinite variations on how you can write it down. So then if you wanted to use the word, suitcase, you'd try to find the word suitcase and it'll show you what that would look like in the barcode.
Are you sure? Are you sure about that last bit?
Yeah. Because
what are your qualifications? I don't know about. What are your qualifications?
Well, we use barcodes.
How does the machine work then? How does the machine work?
Because when you produce them, when you buy, let's say it's a thermal label printer machine, which is typically what will print your barcodes on everyday items or warehouse packaging. Yeah. In that label software, there's a drop-down menu that lets you choose your barcode language, that normally starts with the letters EAN.
Right.
Because different countries and different industries have come up with, believe it or not, their own variations of a barcode, what a barcode infrastructure should look like.
So you stick it on a product, and then you sell it to someone who's using the same translating technology or same technology, and they can.
Correct. Yeah. Everybody who uses barcode reading machines, their machines, you would set it to say, well, I want to read barcode language EAN 28 or EAN 29, and so that when you're producing your product, so let's say you were at Tesco's might say to the company that supplies them with, let's say, pre-packaged sandwiches, they would say, when you produce our sandwiches, use the barcode language EAN 28.
Right, that's the one we use.
Yeah.
And so the relationship's only ever between supplier and seller. There's no central database, because you could see why people might have thought there was a central database of barcodes, and you sort of get given one, like you do car registration numbers or something like that, but that'd be just billions and billions and billions. Well, I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense.
There's free barcode software. You can put in a word or your number or whatever, and it'll show you what it would look like as a barcode.
EAN is European Article Numbers.
Yeah.
So,
and it's the same thing. QR codes are the same kind of thing.
Right.
Machine
readable information. Really.
Yeah.
Why?
Pardon?
Why?
Why have barcodes?
Yeah.
Because it speeds up. You can just blip it. It was before you.
Of course. So it's scanning all the information that you need, what it is, and how much it costs in one scan, rather than having to. Read the tin or something and then look up the price list. Yeah, it was a silly question at the end by me there, for which I apologise. Round of qualifications, Paul?
Mine?
Yeah.
It's in engineering.
But what do you do at work? You create barcodes at work for packaging the products that you're...
No. Actually, I'm involved in the design and manufacture of life jackets. Oh,
and you need to put barcodes on the packaging?
Correct, yeah.
Round of applause for Paul. I like it. 12:43 is the time. Grant's in Southampton. Grant, question or answer?
It's an answer, actually.
Carry on, Grant.
So it's to do with the Cockney rhyming slang.
Oh, go on.
So if I give you my qualification on this first, it was because my dad was in the Army, PWRR, and played rugby against Army and Navy.
Fair enough.
And in the aftermath of the rugby games, we would obviously be in the bar. It can get quite abusive and quite insulting between team and friends in a friendly way. And the reason I know that this is real is that we had a couple of Gurkha lads from Nepal and a couple of Kiwis, obviously from New Zealand.
Yeah.
And they would argue with my dad and other English guys in the regiment. They would argue about the way that commands were shouted at each other on the pitch, and then the insults that they would have afterwards. And then I can distinctly remember them arguing about the way that words were said and the way the words were pronounced. And that came about that my dad then explained to me that as he was born and bred in London, it was their version of Cockney rhyming slang, which is why it really made me laugh when I actually heard that.
Heard the question.
And then when I spoke to your lady...
Burmese,
sorry, when I spoke...
the Burmese have rhyming slang?
Yes, they do, and the Kiwis, New Zealand, yeah.
But they'd be speaking English, though.
No, that's in their own language. So they would be shouting at each
Maori?
other, and and they would argue with each other.
You're confusing the issue by talking about rugby. Because the rhyming slang doesn't only exist on the rugby pitch.
No, of course, it was about the insults. That was where the main side of...
Yeah, okay. Do you know any?
Unfortunately not. And I did, after I spoke to a lady when I came in with my answer, I actually tried to... Sorry, excuse me. I actually tried to ring my dad to say, look, can you give me anything off the top of your head? And unfortunately, there was no answer. So
if there was, we'd have no way of knowing how rude they were, would they?
Of course.
Okay, I'm going to give you a round of applause, but there is room for embellishment on this one. I think. Lovely stuff. Round of applause for Grant. It can make sense, but then it doesn't. Parts of it don't make sense. Why would you do it? I know it's not about slang terms. It's about rhyming slang terms. So you'd call someone something because it rhymed with what you really meant. I can't do that joke, can I? About the Chancellor?
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:49. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Examples of rhyming slang in other languages. We've given some points to Liam on that one, but there's room for more. We still don't know what's going on anatomically or biologically when your arms rise into the air after you've been pushing them against an immovable object for a while. What is that about? So if your muscles are still pushing, and yet you can't think of it operating in many other contexts, what is that shiny band across a towel that's not the hem, categorically not the hem? It's both bigger than the hem and not on the edge of the cloth, of the textile. You might be able to go a little further than Paul on the barcodes question. And what is policing by consent? Sorry, I don't know what happened to my consonants there, old boy. I must apologise. What is policing by consent, and is it only us what has it? Ray's in Purley. Ray, question or answer?
Oh, hi, it's a question, please. I just wondered if I bought shares in a company today for, say, £10,000, and tomorrow they were only worth £5,000.
Yeah.
Where does my money go?
Well, why would a share be any different from an apple?
I don't. What do you mean by that?
Or a car? If you bought a car today for £10,000.
Well, car is wear and tear, isn't it?
Yeah.
And apples deteriorate.
Well, no. I mean, okay. Think of another example. It's just gone down in value. That's all. I suppose the key difference is that it won't go up again. But in the case of a car, actually, it did, didn't it? During lockdown, second-hand cars ended up costing almost more than new cars. So just the money doesn't go anywhere. It's just what it's worth has gone down.
Right.
And
Okay.
you would establish that only when you sell it, just like with a car.
Okay, so the money just disappears into thin air.
Well, there isn't any money. There is a promise to.
It's my money. I've just spent £10,000.
Yeah, and you've been given a share, not money. So your share when you bought it was worth £10,000, but now it's only worth £5,000. Just like your car's worth less the minute you drive it off a forecourt than it was when you bought it. If it goes down, it could have been worth £20,000, which is why you bought it in the first place. But it's not like the finite amount of money in the world is being redistributed constantly according to shares, partly because there isn't a finite amount of money in the world.
But I mean, supposing I had the money physically in my hands that day.
Yeah. The money's gone to the bloke you bought it off, mate. Just like with your car. He's still got £10,000, but the thing you swapped for £10,000 isn't worth £10,000 anymore. It's not really a mystery, is it still, Ray?
Oh, okay.
So think about. I think like me, we're a bit mystified by stocks and shares, and we think they've got some, but it is just it's like a banknote. But inflation means a banknote's worth different amounts to what it was worth when you first got it out of the cash point.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
I don't think you're happy with your answer, but that's the only answer I think you're going to get. Also, I haven't had a round of applause today, so, swings and roundabouts. Thank you, Ray. Cheers, I'll take that.
Thank you.
Keith. No, thank you. Someone's going to ring in now and make me sound like a right old muppet. Peter is in Twickenham. Peter, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Peter Kirkham. That will be the police question then.
Strangely enough, yes.
Carry on.
And your money's safe because it all dates back to Robert Peel.
Go on then.
Back in 1829, which is generally considered the founding of modern policing in the UK, although some will claim a little bit sooner than that.
Yes.
The legal system, we had magistrates and judges, and the courts ordered things like warrants and such like.
Yeah.
But they had no organised police service on the lines of the modern policing.
Yes.
There were watchmen in various communities.
Yeah.
There were local constables. That existed as a thing way back before that. But it was all a bit haphazard. We had the Bow Street runners, the two magistrates in Bow Street, decided they needed a bit of a leg up, so they had invented the Bow Street runners to support them.
Yeah.
They were more like court bailiffs than
So
police,
private
really.
sector, really, in a way, individual private sector organisations doing a sort of security job.
Yeah, and some were, back in the days that if you weren't any good at baking, you all sort of chipped in and kept Mr. Bun the baker in business by buying his bread. And he wasn't any good at shoeing horses.
Almost like protection rackets, actually, but on the other side of the coin.
Yeah, I mean, they were totally open to corruption and abuse and incompetence and heaven knows what else.
But you pay a small subscription, and I promise to protect your premises, as it were.
Yeah, basically.
There it is.
But so Robert Peel set out 9 principles.
Yeah.
And using those principles, things like you need the support of the public.
And that's where the consent comes in.
You don't need to use force unless absolutely necessary. Yeah. So it's consent on a societal scale.
So we imbue this institution. Yeah, we imbue this institution with an authority.
Yeah, exactly. And there's transparency, integrity, and all those sorts of things, which is why
those were the days.
Loss of the trust of the public in these days
yes.
Is so important because it actually eats away at the bedrock of our model of policing. The alternative is policing by consent.
Yeah.
One of the things that gave him the impetus was shortly before 1829, there was the Peterloo massacre in Manchester, which illustrates the point that when the magistrates' orders needed to be enforced, extremis, they'd call in the military.
Yeah.
And there was a
that's a really important point.
Civil uprising.
Yes.
And there were cavalry charges, I believe, and people died.
Yes, there were.
And that was the impetus he needed to get the support to get it through. As for who else has it?
Yeah.
Places basically that model themselves on us, so the Australias and New Zealands and Canadas and whatever.
Five Eyes. I think it was 18 people that died at Peterloo, but I will be...
Was it? You're on Wikipedia then, are you?
I'm not on this one. I went to the Museum of the Working Class in Manchester. That's where I learned to say class instead of class.
Yeah.
And it is, it is. And also, I did a play called Fame is the Spur by Howard Spring that referred back to Peterloo for some reason. I can't remember why. Anyway, I'm probably wrong, Peter, to be honest with you. But what are your qualifications? Just remind us on this one.
I'm a former Detective Chief Inspector in the Met.
That'll do.
I've got a Master's in Policing Issues.
Gosh.
And I used to do police training, and I always made it my business to make sure my students knew the background of where it came from, because it is absolutely fundamental.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. And that is really important and really helpful, actually. So policing by consent is a lot more than just some sort of pithy catchphrase. It's a fundamental bedrock of our... It's almost democratic consent, isn't it? Round of applause for Peter.
Absolutely.
Thank you, mate. Lovely stuff. Always good to talk. It's coming up to 12:57. Neil's in Wokingham. Neil, question or answer?
Point of contention, please, James.
Carry on, mate. Steward's inquiry. Steward's inquiry is the correct nomenclature.
Bring out the stewards.
What have we got?
Paul's answer on barcodes had me seething, if I'm honest.
I'm sorry, man. I thought it might not
and
be right.
you gave him a round of applause. And I immediately text. I went on to X, formerly Twitter. I was like, James, revoke it.
Okay. Well, here you are. Make it snappy, though, because we're short of time.
Make it snappy. There are multiple central databases. However, the biggest one in the world for barcodes is GS1.
Right.
They set the biggest standards. You cannot just encode a barcode willy-nilly if you're Tesco.
You are cross, aren't you, about this?
Oh, this is my job. I do this all day, every day.
I can tell. Carry on.
The barcode is comprised...
Neil when it comes to seriously, do not mess with Neil on barcodes.
Please
there will be blood. We will fight, said Penny Morton.
Let me finish.
I will. Sorry.
Yes,
carry on.
So the first part of the barcode explains who, we call it a retail brand owner, who they are. So the first 5 digits, possibly 6, says, I am Tesco. The next part of the barcode, if we're using an EAN13, so the next 5 or 6 digits, that tells you what this SKU is. So either a bacon sandwich or some Coke or whatever. Yeah. And then the last part of that, we have a check digit, which makes sure that all of the other digits beforehand all make sense to avoid any possible duplication. That's all managed by one central database. So if I buy a Coke in Asda or a Coke or any other soft drink in any other retailer, it always scans as a 500ml bottle of X drink.
Thank goodness you're here.
The answer was and an EAN28 doesn't exist. There's no such thing.
Paul, flipping at Paul on the Wirral. Look what you've done to my programme, man.
Please revoke that round of applause.
Well, that's a bit...
The only bit he got right was speed of reference. That is why you have a barcode, to avoid user error keying.
So do you pay a subscription to the people who are keeping the data?
You pay a subscription to GS1. They allot you a range
That's what I thought,
of codes.
That's what I thought.
And then no other member can have those codes. Therefore, whenever you scan it in one place or another, you always get the same outcome.
And the codes go to producers?
They go, yes. So Coca-Cola, so that was a Tesco own brand sandwich, but so Coca-Cola would have the first 6 digits and then the second 6 digits.
It, mate. There's no way I'm not going to give you a round of applause. I've got a feeling you'd be round my house by tea time if I didn't. So Paul in the Wirral, it's a revoke. It's a revocation.
Thank you very much.
And this one is for qualifications. I just describe it. You've already told us.
This is my job. Believe it or not, I don't work for GS1, but I work for Avery Dennison, who utilise this information in order for us to put barcodes on other things.
Yeah, yes, there we go. So a big round of applause for Neil, please. Are you all right now? Are you feeling okay?
I need to calm down now after that awful answer from Paul. But
I'm going to give you a board game. I'm going to give you a board game. Because,
whoa, no way.
Yeah, seriously. Just,
you know what? I told my mum to listen in.
There it is. Well, there it is. That's her Christmas present sorted.
Well done. Look, with 2 hearts. Cheers, Mum.
Well done, Neil. Well done, Neil's mum. Take care, mate. Bye now. There it is. I had to give it. I feel bad now. I actually offended him. It was almost sort of... If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player. Fight! Rewind Live Radio or enjoy the whole show podcast. Fight! Where you'll also find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as the world's biggest podcasts, whether made of iron or velvet. Rewind Live Radio on Global Player. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Swarbrick with you at 4, but now it's time to fight Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.